All right, everybody. Welcome to our Sunday discussion. And this week we'll be talking about the 10 ox herding pictures. The 10 ox herding pictures originated in China in the 11th century. And they are, they would be considered a map. If you look into different traditions, each tradition seems to have a map like this, similar. Um, and so this is a sort of a mapper of the stages of insight or stages to enlightenment. So I'm going to post some pictures in the No Mic channel so that we can all sort of follow along, and we'll just go through each picture, and I just have a little bit of information on them, and then we can kind of discuss what we see in that picture or what that picture means.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the ox herding pictures uh, have a ox and a herdsman. This is sort of the theme, the characters in this story. And so I wanted to ask for some of the people that checked out the videos or have looked into this topic, what they thought the ox and the herdsman represented within the context of the story. So we could start with first question: what is this ox? Does anybody have any comments?
Um, I didn't watch all the videos, but I know the basic story and I read the Wikipedia, and it seems like the ox represents enlightenment. Is that right?
Anybody else? Okay.
I'm not I'm not quite certain what it represents, but it is something that's always there, that we are looking for, and it is the same thing that drives us in our daily life. That is also it can be directed and used towards enlightenment.
Yeah, exactly. So my notes were the ox sort of represents um, the true self. Some people call it that. Enlightenment, fulfillment, an everlasting happiness, peace, ongoing well being. So these were some of the just different words that I wrote down, sort of um, describe what this ox in the story is sort of representing. So for the herdsman, uh, what are your ideas on what this represents? The little man, the herdsman in the picture.
I would say the herdsman is us seeking enlightenment or seeking answers.
Yeah. So uh, I wrote the ego, the self or little self, um, self identification, grasping sort of the, um, you could say, the ordinary human nature. That can also sort of lean towards what happens or what is the fruit of enlightenment, but just sort of the human nature as it normally is in society. And that is the sort of what the herdsman represents. So I posted a picture in the No Mic channel. And this is the first picture in the series of 10. And this one is titled In Search of the Bull. Um, Throughout the pictures, they kind of use bull and ox um, in different places. They represent the same thing. Um, so there's a little story that goes along with this that why kind of puts it into context. So in ancient China, they used to send young boys out to to go out into the wild and actually capture a an ox to bring it back to the village as as sort of a test to their manlyhood. A lot of ancient cultures have that, um, and so this was a sort of a test. So that sort of gives context on the importance of the journey. So the first picture is the herdsman. He's uh, he's just standing in the woods. He has no idea, no direction, doesn't know where to even look to go and look for uh, this thing that he is um, being told to go look for. So this is the title of this picture is In Search of the Bull. And each picture has a little poem to go along with it. And the poem for the first picture is In the pastures of the world, I endlessly push aside the tall grasses in search of the ox, following unnamed rivers, lost upon the interpenetrating paths of distant mountains. My strength failing and my vitality exhausted, I cannot find the ox. So, this is the sort of everyday person um, living their life in search for this happiness or this fulfillment. Um, and then, people go and they look for this in all sorts of things. I sat and thought, and the three main ones I think that people really go looking for this happiness or fulfillment is drugs, um, sex or relationship, and money. Now, from these three, you could, you know, there's so many other ways people look for happiness or find little pieces of happiness. But I think these are the three main ones. They're the three main ones because they give the most sort of immediate, direct experience of that sort of fulfillment, that temporary fulfillment. So like a couple other ones would be like a relationship. You gain some kind of happiness. Usually, that fades fairly quickly. Um, the power, power and success, seeking that career, that job. Usually, another part of that is money. So that goes back to those main three. And then another another fulfillment or object for fulfillment is like food. People gain that small piece of fulfillment or happiness through eating food and um, but just a temporary thing. As soon as the food is gone and that feeling of literally being fulfilled, it kind of goes away, then you're off seeking something else.
Um, so in the first one, people in their, who are in this state in society, do they know what they're looking for? Like, do they know it's, to use this analogy, an ox, or are they just looking for something and they don't know what it is?
I think that they know, um, in a general sense, they know what it is, but they don't know where to find it. And then where they're looking is they're always experiencing very fleeting glimpses, just the tiny pieces of that thing that they're looking for. And so they just keep looking and looking and looking. And so that kind of goes back to that poem um, for this for this picture, following the unnamed rivers, lost upon the interpenetrating paths of distant mountains, my strength failing and my vitality exhausted. This is the sort of are getting to a point where they've tried all the things, and it just doesn't seem to really uh, last.
Hmm.
All right, so the second picture, this is titled Discovery of the Footprints. And the poem that goes along with it is, along the river banks, under the trees, I discover footprints. Even under the fragrant grasses, I see his prints. Deep in remote mountains, they are found. These traces can no more be hidden than one's nose looking heavenward. So this is like sort of the next step of this path to enlightenment, if you want to call it that. And this is where the footprints are like, you might hear a Dharma talk, or you found an interesting book at a yard sale and it just sort of caught your attention. Um, could also be like footprints are sort of like a gut feeling for the direction of where some form of truth might be found. Um, you might have heard a saying from the Buddha, um, or even possibly like some kind of spontaneous event that kind of shook you or struck you. It sort of resonated with you, to core part of your being, like just something there said that there was truth or something more to be found uh, in this direction. Any thoughts?
I like that the picture before. Um, the guy was standing at the cliff where he clearly would not be able to find the ox. I mean, he was looking downwards and there would be no ox there. But now he's turned around and now he's found, and yeah, he has found the direction, and I like that.
Yeah, the pictures actually have a lot of meaning and representation just in the drawings. So you can kind of see, yeah, just like you were saying, he's in the first picture, he's kind of has his hand on his eyes, and he's just like he's standing on top of like a hill or a cliff, and so that he can kind of try and see more of the land, the layout, and he doesn't even know where he's looking. He's just sort of lost and trying to find. And so the second picture is that he actually finds a hint, and he's moving in that direction.
Yeah, I like the direction aspect of it because it's like, the difference between kind of wandering aimlessly and then wandering with a purpose, or having a direction to go in. It's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, that's why I kind of said that, there was a gut feeling of the direction of where truth might be found. So like you hear something or read something and it just sort of resonates with you, like, there's something here that I, you know, just intuitively sense. So that's sort of like uh, the beginning. And you might be able to look back in your own experience, and it might be difficult to pin that exact moment down, but um, it would have, it couldn't have happened um, if you're here, so it must have happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I remember I don't know if I remember like the exact moment, but it felt like it was kind of slowly building up.
I don't know if that's significant or just something random, but it seems like in the second picture things start to blossom. It's more like springy or something. I don't know if that has any significance, but I find it interesting.
All right. Third picture is titled Glimpsing the Tail of the Bull. So this is like a really uh this is a saying in Zen. I think that this is something that they say quite a lot, the glimpse of the tail, because the importance of that statement is when you get a glimpse, you sort of think you've gotten it. And this happens several times through the path. You think you've gotten it all. You're like, oh no, I saw it, I got it, and that's it. And then there's the teacher that's like, yeah, not even close. So kind of puts them back, grounds them a bit. The poem that goes along with the third picture, Glimpsing the Tail of the Bull, is I hear the song of the nightingale. The sun is warm. The wind is mild. Willows are green along the shore. Here no ox can hide. What artist can draw that massive head, those majestic horns? So he's tracked the bull to an area where it's more open and there's not a lot of places for him to hide anymore. So he can get a better glimpse, a look at it. So that's the poem that goes along with that. And so what actually occurs if you're have experienced this third picture? And that would be you've started to actually read and research more, um, talking to teachers, sort of intellectualizing the material about the Dharma and Buddhism, um, starting to maybe even try out the practice, occasionally doing some meditation, sort of dabbling in different things. Maybe even went for a week retreat or something like that. And then after some time working with the sort of right practices and um, getting a better understanding of what they're pointing to, you'll get a glimpse of the bull. And in Zen, they call this glimpse a kensho, but light. Well, a light kensho. So you didn't really get a full on look. It's just you just got a glimpse of the the whole thing.
Yeah, and this concept is actually extraordinary. So, is that all you were going to go with it on light Kensho versus, or did I interrupt you?
That's all I was gonna say. The next one will be more about the full thing.
Okay.
Just kind of giving an idea that there is there is a glimpse that happens, and unless you've had the full on sighting of the bull, you'll think that that was actually seeing the bull. Only when you've had the full on sighting can then you look back and go, oh no, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Like that was I see now. I just got a glimpse. But until you have that, you won't know because you won't have anything to compare it to. So you'll think that it's the full on sighting.
Um, I have another question. What is it about this experience that makes people feel like they got it completely?
Because it feels like what they expect enlightenment should feel like. I mean, absolutely. This is easily 90% of the people running around saying, I've got it, is a light can show.
It's that powerful that it can kind of convince you that it's a, a very big deal. Um, and it's not to say that it isn't, but we have to place it along um, this sort of continuum of these pictures and what they're sort of talking about. And it is a significant portion, but it's just as significant as finding the footprints. The each step is in itself very significant. Um, but we have to say this is what it is, and that can be difficult for somebody to accept because it can feel um, a bit disappointing because one would have felt that they put in a lot of work and they there's also the component of really like wanting the sort of suffering to be over with, and they were hoping that this was it, and then they can just not not continue to continue to suffer. And um, it's another component can kind of come in where they feel like because they also had a direct experience with it, that there's a sort of a impulse to talking about it, start to try and maybe teach or uh,
Write a book.
help, yeah, write a book or help other people. Usually it's sort of tainted with a very strong ego. Um, this sort of I'm had a glimpse, so I'm, you know, I'm good, I'm better. You should listen to me.
A lot of spontaneous poetry will happen about this spot.
And these are just some examples. I mean, it manifests in all different kinds of ways. And this is the kind of the part where it's important to have a teacher that can ground you, that you can trust to go to tell you the truth without um, messing with you, and also encouraging you. You know, like, yeah, I understand. I'm telling you, it's not what you wanted to hear, but don't worry. You know, we're gonna help you out. You know, we're here to help, and we're gonna keep you on track. This what you really want. I mean, if this is what you really want, you know, we're here. We're gonna get you to continue and to, you know, take this as you want. So,
So,
give me
uh, is this like a dangerous step because people can think that they don't have to do any more if they think that this is, if they falsely think this is the final step? Is this like a place where a lot of people get stuck?
Yeah, yeah. This is pretty much where everyone gets stuck. I mean, like Mike said, you get a glimpse of it, and it's so earth-shattering, it's so world-rocking that you're absolutely convinced you've got it. And this is where people tend to stop and then get sort of get that stench of enlightenment about them.
But what about Gautama? I don't think he had any teachers or guides as such into to Buddha.
well, he if you look into the story, he actually did have teachers.
He actually, yeah, he studied under three different teachers in rapid succession.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they were
Yeah,
having him
yeah, but
fasting and stuff, and
yeah, I know. But he was the first one to become enlightened, wasn't he?
According to the story, or like realistically?
According to the story.
Um, that's doctrines. Mike, you want to answer that one?
well, your question is, was he the first person to become enlightened? I don't know that. I don't think anybody could say for sure, right? We can't make that direct of a assertion. That's what the story says. That's all I can say. But if I'm speaking perfectly honest, I don't know. Could it? Yeah. Could it not? Sure, just as equally a chance, I think.
Yeah, well, the thing is, if he had teachers who themselves weren't enlightened, then I guess they weren't teachers as such. They couldn't guide him.
Well, that's
Well,
the
this
thing.
gets back to degrees.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, well, this gets back to degrees of enlightenment. Lauren and I had a debate about this earlier, and I personally I like to use enlightenment in terms of little e enlightenment and big E, capital E enlightenment. Little e enlightenment, that kensho, that glimpse, that, or you could have even had picture five. You could have had a much deeper, complete satori type of experience, and yet kind of relapse, fall back. I would lump all that under more like enlightenment experiences, and therefore assign it little e enlightenment. Now, what Lauren was calling enlightenment was essentially bodhisattvahood, where it's enlightened all the time, basically living in that space all the time. You never fall back to earth. You never have a relapse or a bad day. You just sort of stick there. And that's big E enlightenment. So, from my reading of it, Buddha's original instructors all had various enlightenment experiences or tricks they taught, little e, but they never found enlightenment, big E. That's just my personal reference system on the subject.
So, should we move on to the fourth picture, or does anybody have anything that they want to talk about? All right. I posted the fourth picture, and the fourth picture is titled "Catching the Bull." And the poem that goes along with this picture is "I seize him with a terrifying struggle. His great will and power are inexhaustible. He charges to the high plateau, far above the cloud mists, or in a impenetrable ravine he stands. So he's um, not not cooperating. He's running, and you got the rope sort of on him, but he's just dragging you around wherever he seems to want to go. And you know, the herdsman sort of has him in a ravine, but he he's sort of dug in. He doesn't want to come out of that ravine. And so what this picture would sort of stand for as is catching the bull is getting a real direct experience of your true nature, the full on uh, view of the bull. And this there's a lot of different names for what this is, a lot of different teachers, traditions, they call this different things. Um, it is known as an A&P event, or a rising and passing away event. It's known as Satori. It's known as Kensho. You might call it breaking the barrier of dualism. This is also stream entry in the Theravada. And this stream entry is also called Sotapanna. These are just different words and labels for this experience.
It's mentioned that it's a struggle. I would imagine it also is kind of scary.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is described. It's in that poem. You know, you seize the bull, you catch the full scope of what you're dealing with, and it's a terrifying struggle. You realize how much power it has, and it just seems inexhaustible. Like it just it's would could just take you wherever it wanted to go without even uh, slowing down. And it can be a little scary. At this point, you would have to have had some level of practice, sustained practice. So it's it can be a little scary, but um, you know in the realm of what you're dealing with. So it's not it's probably not going to like damage you mentally. I'm not saying 100%, not absolute. There might be some people that have had it and are just so terrified that they're just like, never mind, I don't want to go any further. They just kind of forget the whole thing and go back to their 9 to 5 job. Um, that's very possible.
AMP events are terrifying. I mean, they don't. I guess they don't necessarily have to be, but I would always, yeah, pretty terrifying. That's just my opinion.
I would call it, at least personally, I guess it would depend on the person, but definitely alarming, if not terrifying, because it's an event that occurs where you sort of almost feel like a different person at the end of it because you're seeing things so differently. So that's definitely very alarming, if nothing.
Yeah, that's a better word. Alarming. I'll take that one.
I guess one is also at this point trying to find a way in the world to interact with people. And
Yeah,
That's
it can.
actually one of the most difficult parts. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. We talked exactly at the same time. No, yeah, it is difficult. It is a little bit of a struggle. Um, I would say it's it's just a temporary um, sort of temporary setback. You will learn to integrate it. Um, it will become sort of the norm uh, of experience. So it's not, it can be that way for a little while, but it doesn't remain that way.
So, would this phase be related to um, just the meditation part, where you're trying to uh, get to that state of mind?
So this is something that is separate from meditation. This is not a um, this is not an experience that um, it's difficult to speak about. Can it happen while you're meditating? Yes, but a it isn't a state of mind or state of consciousness, which is what you're dabbling in when you're doing meditation. The meditation or states of mind within meditation are places that you can return over and over again. This is something completely different from that. But through meditation, this experience, it's training you to be more focused and more conscious and more aware. And so it lends itself to um, the experience coming into fruition.
So, like an everyday experience.
No, you will absolutely freak out. I mean, it's guaranteed.
What is so scary about it? I think I'm not understanding that part.
Mike, what is so scary about it?
I'd assume because it's ego breaking, it goes against everything that you've ever thought of. I'd
Yeah,
say that.
yeah. It if a person has experienced maybe a psychedelic, it's yeah, it's on the level of ego death through psychedelics. But the difference is that you're not on a drug and you're, um, it's very hard to believe that it's happening without some kind of aid.
Think of Paul on the road to Damascus, sees a sudden light, blinded by the light, blasted off his horse, wandering around, wondering what the hell just happened to me. This is pretty much.
So this doesn't the difficult in speaking about this is it doesn't appear exactly the same for every person. Um, there's attributes that are similar, but each person would experience it slightly different. Um, in that it can happen in, you know, any imaginable way, you know. It can seem like a dream. Uh, it can be like you're just walking down the road and something happens and you just stop and you're sort of not stuck there, but you're experiencing something that seems so real that it's unreal. And again, there go words. Words fail.
Yeah, I would agree
Is
with that. It's more real than real.
yeah, that's as close as I can get.
It's definitely mind blowing. There's a word that might approximate it pretty well. Disturbing, but really mind blowing. You just walk around blown completely.
So after this experience of direct experience of your true nature, of direct experience of like sort of maybe you could say raw reality, um, then you would be considered uh, this would be considered entering the stream or stream entry. This would be also considered the point at which you really can't go back from. It's like once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You're not going to be the same person again.
I guess that makes sense in terms of the experience of ego death. That is pretty scary.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just the
So,
breaking of all of your previous illusions. I would say, including the ego.
yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. This isn't complete um, destruction of the ego, though. This is was just a temporary experience of egolessness. Um, some time passes, and you'll feel back to yourself, not completely, but you'll feel more normal. So this isn't something that goes you have the experience and then it just keeps going forever. It's an experience that lasts um, a range of, you know, I don't
About a
know,
week, right?
a week or two. Um, I've heard, but heard through hearing somebody else say it, it could last a month. Either way, it's a state that lasts for a short amount of time. Uh, and then you sort of things kind of come back to normal a bit, quite a bit more than they were. But you still have this thing that can't, you're not completely the same.
You never quite believe in the self the way you did before. I mean, you just can't. You know it's not true. Like gravity. So you don't.
Um, so as we go up or go through the next steps, does this um, alternate intelligence, I would say, become more prominent within yourself.
You can always find your way back. When you agree.
Yeah, that's sort of like the one of the components to it is that you can re revisit it. You can kind of how to describe this. Okay. Uh it's like have you who here has gone and seen the Grand Canyon? Who has anybody here been to the Grand Canyon, stood on the edge of the Grand Canyon and actually looked at it for themselves?
I have.
Okay. Would you say then, before you went there, did you see pictures and videos of the Grand Canyon? I mean, you obviously must have, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Compare the thoughts or the feeling of seeing those pictures and or video of the Grand Canyon to the actual standing on the edge experiencing it for real. Can you compare those two?
I can compare them enough to be able to say that um, this was a picture of the Grand Canyon, but um, to compare the experience of looking at the picture versus standing there, I mean, no, they're completely different.
Okay, so this is exactly what it's like. Now that you've had the experience of the Grand Canyon directly, when you see a picture or a video of the Grand Canyon, you might be able to feel slightly different about it. There's a something there that wasn't there before because you've had the direct experience. You notice maybe more details, or the memory of the direct experience is sort of overlaid on top of the new seeing of the picture after the fact. Am I being clear?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would just add, and you know it's there. You know it's there. You don't hypothesize that it's there. You don't theorize that it's there. You don't hope it's there. You don't sit here and imagine what there would be like. You've been there, so you know it's there. So that absolute conviction is kind of like a backdoor pass to getting back to that state.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so fifth picture is titled Taming the Bull. The poem goes along with that is the whip and the rope are necessary, else he might stray off down some dusty road. Being well trained, he becomes naturally gentle. Then, unfettered, he obeys his master. Something I want to point out in the picture is the fourth picture. The bull is completely brown, and in the fifth picture, he is half white and half brown. So this is sort of the sort of a visual representation of um, seeing things more clearly. Also, could say this is uh, sort of purifying the mind, and big quotations there. My notes on this picture was one is not fully overwhelmed by the habitual negative aspects of the mind. It has become clear what practice is and is not. Seeing progress, not just sitting in meditation, but seeing progress in your daily life still requires effort to sort of stay out in front of these negative habits, being mindful of the emotions, thoughts, and actions. So, this is where practice, you're really starting to see. the benefits from practice. Something that I didn't put in my notes. So there would be this space sort of created between um, you, what is aware of, and the thoughts, emotions, and actions. This space is created, and you're able to see them clearly without uh, a habitual reaction to their appearance. Any questions? Uh, I tried to overlay um, the map from the Theravada tradition. This is actually what the Buddha speaks about. He speaks about stream entry or sotapanna. He speaks about once returner or sakadagami. Um, and then he talks about, let me see, the other one is non-returner, origami, and then arahant, fully enlightened. So this fifth picture is where one would be uh, in relationship to that tradition. I'm not sure if this is a perfect map. I'm just tried to do my best to overlay where these pictures um, would co- coincide with the stages that the Buddha also talks about.
Okay, I have a question. Um, so this stage is you've had your first experiences in stage 4 where you experience ego death and the kind of shattering of a lot of illusions, and this is where you've been meditating for a while, you've developed a practice, and it's starting to have an effect when you're not meditating in life.
Yes, exactly.
And what does it mean by it's become clear what practice is and is not?
Um, those were sort of my notes. I said that because um, you will have had enough experience with practice to know what is helpful, what and what is not helpful to keep you to keep the practice going. Um, like you might have worked with a mantra and applying it at different times in different ways, you can see that, okay, if I apply the mantra in this situation, it's beneficial. It leads to maybe a calming of the mind. There's a um, progression of learning or refining these different tools to apply to the different situations, um, so that you're able to not be overwhelmed by the habitual habits and negative mind states and thoughts and actions.
Right, so you're not overwhelmed by these things anymore. So that if negative emotions come up, which I'm sure they still do in this state, you you just don't feel. I get overwhelmed is a very good word, I suppose.
Does it does it make sense to have compassion for the bull, or would that be taking this story a bit too seriously or too literally? Because it seems like the bull is just becoming more and more submissive to this person. I don't know. That was the only thing that I was thinking of when I when the next picture came up.
mm, I think it might be taking it too literally. So, would you have compassion for um, losing your temper at the person that's working behind a counter because they didn't have your favorite ice cream and you yell at them? Do you have compassion for that behavior toward yourself?
Of course not. But
Okay.
how I
You're reading too much
how would
into
that
it.
relate to? Okay, all right, fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Just the bull isn't really a bull in the picture, so I can understand feeling compassion towards the bull, seeing it as a bull, but that's not really what it's meant to be.
Yeah, it's just a representation. It doesn't actually exist.
Could you then explain the submissiveness then of the bull then? Or
Yeah.
is that too literal?
Well, I don't know if I would say submissiveness, but I think that as the bull is becoming, well, we could say submissive, more submissive in the pictures, it's that the person in the pictures is um, becoming closer to true enlightenment, and the bull is representing that, like finding their true self, some sort of enlightenment. And so, I don't know how to say what I'm saying. That as the person understands, quote unquote, the bull better, then the bull would be more available to the person. Does that make sense?
Right. Sure. It okay. I'm reading into it because my next response would have been yeah because but it seems as though it's very self-serving of the person who is trying to gain this ox.
And I could say that that would definitely be true if the ox were representing an ox, but if we were to say that, I mean, the idea of enlightenment doesn't have feelings, but if it did, I think you could say that it would want you to have it. So,
For me, this kind of strikes me as almost a metaphor about the brain, like training the ox until he obeys his master. Like in the poem, kind of sounds like training your brain so that you have control over it instead of it controlling you. Like, um, and that's seems for me what taming the ox would mean.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what practice does. But in the sense that training is sort of the unhooking or um, the letting go of uh, old negative habits based on wrong view. And so once you're starting to gain the right view, the right way of seeing things, it sort of naturally just happens. These behaviors um, no longer uh, have such a strong pull to cause you to act in quote unquote negative way.
So, has the metaphor of the bull kind of changed or evolved a bit here? Because you wouldn't need to tame enlightenment or peace, right?
Yes, that is a very good point. Um, yes, as the story progresses, the understanding or the bull does change. And that's exactly why, right in the fifth picture, it is black and I think it's or brown and white because it is changing.
Um, okay.
And also the relationship between the herdsman and the bull is also changing.
they're becoming more and more related to each other. I'd say that. I mean, that's my personal view.
Um, are we good with this picture, or do any more comments? Any more? We want to talk about this. We're kind of moving a little quickly, so we can, you know, we have plenty of time to talk about each picture, or I can move on to the next one.
Uh, well, it seems like some of these, so each of these are stages because you can get kind of stopped here, right? Like it seems like
Yeah.
I see this a lot too, where people don't do the habit of practicing, and so uh, I mean, taming your mind is like working out your body. It's not something you can just do once and then say, "Oh, I'm in shape now." You have to, keep doing it over time and build up muscle and um, the time and effort it takes. Most people don't want to do that.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So is each stage somewhere that people can kind of get stuck at and plateau? Is that why they're stages?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So I posted the sixth picture, and it is called or titled "Riding the Bull Home." And the poem that goes along with that is mounting the ox, slowly I return homeward. The voice of my flute intones through the evening, measuring with hand beats the pulsing harmony. I direct the endless rhythm. Whoever hears this melody, join me. So this um, stage would be, which isn't represented in this picture, um, but from another set of pictures, which I really liked, um, which was the herdsman was riding the bull backwards. So he wasn't looking where the bull was going. He was riding the bull backwards because he was in complete trust that the bull would take him home to his home, where he didn't need to direct it. He doesn't need to influence. He's just along for the ride, because the bull has been fully tamed. They become good friends. He doesn't have to worry anymore. Um, and my notes for this picture where it was riding the ox backwards is completely surrendering to what is without second thought or second guessing, attuning to the flow of life or an ongoing flow state. Uh, Lauren really likes that word.
Yes,
Giving
I do.
up, giving up this impulsive need to control. Uh, this takes time to get used to this feeling, and there's a can be a lot of on and off again at this step. So it's not really a jump on the bull and just that's it, done, over with. It can be getting used to that feeling. It can be an odd feeling to because you've had this impulse your whole life to really need to have your hands on the steering wheel, uh, and that's where the riding the bull backwards kind of comes into. And so this is like, yeah, this can be another step, and it can take a bit of time. It can, it can go back and forth between sort of the fifth picture and the sixth. Not a It's not a one shot thing. Um, Not like the like stream entry or the glimpsing the bull. the tail of the bull. Those were sort of a one shot, that's it uh, thing. There can be many glimpses and more sort of insights throughout these sets of pictures. Um, a lot of things can happen in your meditation, can happen outside of meditation. A bunch of these little mini sort of kin shows can definitely happen. This is very common for the for the path to be speckled with all of these interesting insights. Um,
And the bull is all white now, too.
yeah, so that is the I think that represents sort of like the um, I mean, you could say a lot of different things about it. I guess I don't really know. Why is the bull completely white? Um, I guess you could say that this would be sort of once you're in this, once you're on the bull and then you haven't gotten back off of it, this would be sort of the full training of the mind. The mind is no longer an issue. It's it's um it's not a problem anymore.
Um, so now we have this third thing, though, which is home. So what's that?
Yes. So home would be the what home would be what we understand as enlightenment, or you could say the human being's natural state, um, that which is not tied down or habitually influenced by the thoughts and emotions. Home is just like it sounds. You know, when you're at home, you feel, I think for the most part, you feel at ease, you feel safe, you feel comfortable, you're relaxed. So, all of these sort of aspects are what it is, what the actual experience is like.
And so at this stage, we still aren't home yet, though. We're just on the way, and we're using our trained mind to get there.
You would this at this stage, this point, you would this would be the um, sort of letting go, surrendering control, and it would involve this sort of on again, off again um, of that control because it's uncomfortable. It takes time to get used to uh, that feeling, and it's just such a habit that um, it just takes time to get used to it to actually really let go.
Why do we struggle with that? With letting go of, with control? Is that an inherent thing that we are, or that's probably a better way to say it because of our conditioning?
It's a very good question. Why do we struggle with um, surrendering, with um, letting go of this control? I think there's a lot of different answers. It's difficult to nail it down to just one thing. I think a large part of it is that we think we know what's best. We know what's right, what um, what we want, um, what it's just yeah, it's a a lot of different answers to that. I mean, anybody else have a little bit of insight?
Um, I think that trying to maintain control makes us feel safe, even if that's not accurate. Or at least I try to only speak for myself. In the past, trying to maintain control has made me feel exactly that, feel in control, feel more safe. So I think that's a reason that some people cling to it.
If let's say that we were born into this enlightened state from the very beginning, all of us, and um, we have never had this kind of problem. But then let's say we had another person who did have this problem. I guess my question would be, what would be the difference between these two people? Is it that they is it just by simply telling someone to control themselves, or by telling them that they can run away from their fears, or run away from pain, or this identification of what is pain and what is bad, and running away from that? Would it would it be some sort of aversion of fear?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but
I,
I'll
I,
try.
I'm I I'll shorten it. What exactly is the origin point as to why we start feeling the need to control ourselves?
I mean, I would say a lot of that is probably just the world that we're raised up in. We're taught that we need to be in control of things, that you need to take hold and create your own destiny, and you need to be successful, and you need to build relationships, and you need to be this certain way in order to do that. And so I think that that's just what we're taught from the time that we're very small.
Yeah, I think it also has to do with not wanting things the way that they are, not accepting things the way that they are, wanting to change something. And you can't change something unless you have control over it. But yeah, like B said, we're also raised being told, get a hold of yourself, control yourself, that type of thing. So there develops this kind of lack of acceptance of the way things are, and then wanting to change it and needing to control it in order to change it.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's conditioning through the way you were raised, through society. That's part of it. That's conditioning. The other part is exactly what Lauren said. This grasping at the things that we want and the aversion or pushing away of the things that we don't want. And through those, and then also the false self identification. So falsely identifying with something that can um, be hurt and manipulated, and those three things sort of create this solid um, conditioning, which has a lot of problems. And so the practice is sort of this unwrapping, unbinding, untangling of all of that um, that has, been what your life has been up to this discovery, up to this seeing, oh hey, there's another way to do this thing. That's much, well, you don't really know. You have an inkling, you have an idea, but all these wise people, they're saying this is a much better way to live, to experience life in this way. And if you didn't think that there was a better way, then you wouldn't be concerned. You wouldn't be worried. You'd just be like, nope, there's not a better way. That's just what it is. Yeah, I just suffer, and there's no point for me to find a better way to experience life. So then you just continue to do whatever you want to do, and you'd be left with that.
Why do we why would you think we fall under this conditioning? Is it just because at a young age we were so suggestible to what other people said?
Well, from and a childhood development standpoint, yes, young children are very susceptible to the way that we mold them. But I think even if it weren't for that, even as you get older, we're still pretty susceptible to the environment that we're in. And I think, particularly with Western culture, um, it would be very difficult to not want to be in control of things, because that is very much like we're raised to be very independent and very in control. So I think that it would you would have to have some outside influence or read something or seen something that really affected you to make you want to look at things differently.
Yeah, I wonder too if there is also a biological aspect to it, you know? I mean, we are animals, we have that id side of our mind, the fight or flight response to things, and I know there's like two others, like freeze and friend, maybe. Um, and maybe there's another one I'm forgetting, but I think there is kind of a biological instinct to survive, and that turned into adjusting your environment to survive. And now that we're in in a daily life situation where we don't have to struggle to survive every day, we turn that struggle into other things that aren't related to survival. Maybe.
Yeah, that these old conditionings, biological conditionings, did serve a purpose. They were important. I don't want to go into it, but if you want to say evolution of the brain and how it works and how it perceives what those stages, it was very useful. Um, but life has unfolded in such a way that those aren't necessary anymore, and they're getting in the way. And this is sort of the another upward turn towards a more efficient way to live, um, and to interact with the world.
I kind of want to ask about the bull because it seems like, and I might have misunderstood in the beginning, we were saying that what we're seeking is the bull, and the bull is enlightenment, but it seems like the bull has changed into, um, our own minds and taming our minds and understanding them so that we can ride the bull to what we're now seeking, which is the home, which is maybe the real enlightenment. So there was what we thought we were chasing, what we thought was enlightenment, which was the bull, but now we're using that to get to actual enlightenment. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The it's funny because like there's so much information out now that um it's all there, and most of this stuff would have been kept secret, but all the secrets are out. Yes, enlightenment is like a carrot on a stick, and uh, and at the end, not needed anymore. But the Buddha even said this, you know, he said, you construct the raft and you navigate it across the river. And once you get to the far shore, you abandon the raft. You get off the raft. You don't carry it around with you. You don't need it anymore. It's over. It's done. You don't, it's served its purpose and you don't need it. But this is the one of the most dangerous things about this whole thing is if you try to abandon it before it is necessary to abandon it, then you're basically jumping out of the raft in the middle of the river and you're just going to drown. You know, you're not going to make it. So this is it's a double-edged sword. To know that this is sort of where it's going and what's to look forward at is good, but it's also extremely dangerous because the ego will want to take that and will want to use it and it will say, I'm done. I don't need any more. I'm there. I'm enlightened. I'm good. And then you're there. You're stuck. You've trapped yourself again. And so this is extremely dangerous and not dangerous in like um you're going to hurt yourself in any way. It's just that you give up too early and you don't get to experience the real fruit at the end. And I say dangerous, it's more of just a really it's a shame. It's be a tragedy if you th- put all this work into it and then you just threw it away like, you know, like Da Vinci painting a painting and, you know, having it almost done and then just going, ah, it's finished and just throwing it in the trash, you know. It's like that. It's so you have to be extremely careful. Um and it this is a thing that you this is what one thing that I stress the most, and it will help you every single stage, is extreme honesty. Extreme honesty. You don't have to go and tell somebody else, but be honest with yourself. If you can find that in you to be very honest with yourself and really look at what's going on, then you're going to be fine. You're going to be you're that's your that's your anchor to to continuing forward, is that honesty.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that honesty is kind of reflected in the clarity of the bull being all white now um, and being tamed.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's just looking at your thoughts, looking at your emotions, looking at your mind, your situations, your reactions to situations, and going, um, am I upset with this? Am I attached to this? Am I clinging to this thing that I want, or am I avoiding this thing that I don't want? Um, and just being very honest with yourself. If you can do that, you're good. Maybe not the anchor. It's more of like the paddle. It's your oar that you use with the raft. Honest. If you throw honesty out off into the river, then you're done. Like you're not going anywhere.
Would honesty be mastered at this stage or at the stage before this when you're still uh, taming?
I would say it's probably the picture before, because at picture 6 it really becomes this this habit of control and sort of being brave, um, courageous to really just uh, be able to fully let go. That it takes that submission, um, sort of submission to the universe. It's not going to make you just sit like a vegetable or a potted plant. You're going to be okay. Things are still going to move. You're still, you're still going to go hang out with your friends and have conversations and eat food that you enjoy. It's not like that, you know. It's just this habit of grasping and pushing away, um, and just allowing things to be as they are without um, the need to control them.
It seems like 4 through 6, you can kind of move back and forth between, or maybe just 4 and 5. I'm not sure.
Yeah, 4 and 5, I would say that there's a going back and forth. The whole thing isn't, don't look at it as super concrete, you know, that if you're at, at 5, then 4 through 1, or they're just gone. They don't exist anymore. It's not really like that. It's a flow, um, and this also is time bound. Just because I'm I'm telling you this is what it is, this is how it works, like that doesn't really help you. Not really. It takes time. It takes you actually doing it, and it takes time for this to unfold in the way that it will.
Yeah, and all the stages
You,
are kind of fluid between each other.
yeah, it can be, definitely. There's really only certain spots, and these are just the if you're looking at it as a timeline in a way, there's only there's very few places where there's just this sort of immediate irreversible point, but beyond that it can be very flowy and um, move around, and um, it doesn't necessarily have to go from 4 to 5 to 6. There can be some riding the bull, and then it can kind of go back a bit to taming the bull. Like
The
it's
bull
not
throws you off.
yeah, it's not real rough. It can flow a bit. You could also see it if in your practice, if you're actually sitting doing meditation and you're getting up and you're being mindful, trying to continue that focus throughout the day. You're If you're doing this practice and you're committed to it, you're going to see that certain things are sort of developing at different rates. Like your posture might be really poor, but you're still gaining mindfulness while sitting, and then you get up to walk, and you're able to stay sort of mindful, but the sense doors are sort of getting overwhelmed where you're sort of um losing track of what is actually hitting or coming into awareness, and it's not cut and dry. It's not like the factors sort of grow and um develop at their own rate, and you're not going from one, okay, we're going to practice just to being mindful, and then you're going to move on to this. It's sort of like happens in a more fluid way. Number 7 is titled "The Bull Transcended." The poem that goes along with it is astride the ox I reach home. I am serene. The ox too can rest. The dawn has come in blissful repose. Within my thatched dwelling, I have abandoned the whip and the rope. So, this is where uh, the parable of abandoning the raft would be coming in. You don't need the whip, the rope. Um, the ox can rest. Is done its job. It's brought you home, and it can rest, and no more work is needed. What has been done is done. This would be uh, nirvana. This would be enlightenment. This would be um, arahantship. All of these are just labels. My notes here are: the ox carries you back to your true natural self or natural state. The ox uh, is gone and the herdsman remains. After one crosses the river to the far shore, one abandons the raft. Arhat. The path bears ultimate fruit, nirvana. Residual traces of a separate self fall away for good. What is left is a continual experience of peace and safety, a feeling of comfort with life just as it is, as it arises and passes away, as all of the conditions come in to awareness and leave awareness. Life just as it is happening.
I noticed in this picture that it's kind of like the first picture where he's looking out at this view of mountains and stuff, but he doesn't have the rope in his hand anymore. So it's like the desire to control or tame anything is gone, right?
Yes, exactly. The whip and the rope have been abandoned.
And the ox
But
is
you see, those things were needed. They were extremely important tools. Without those, you couldn't have even you couldn't have gotten back home. So you can't throw your whip and your rope away before you get home, or you'll just be lost in the woods.
and the ox is gone also now.
Any questions or comments on this picture? Um, so the 8th, 9th, and 10th pictures are not they're not new steps or new stages. One should see them as a set of pictures. So I'm going to post them all at the same time.
It is kind of hard to believe that there are three more, parts to it, but I guess it makes sense if they're not steps.
Okay, so these three pictures, these three last pictures, I'm going to take and repeat what Shinzen Young was saying about them, because I think that what he said was correct. The pictures are not new stages, but they represent the substance, the form, and the purpose at the end of the process of enlightenment. So um, these are we'll just go with the first one, the substance. What is enlightenment, or what is the true self? What is your natural state? So this picture is titled "Both the Bull and the Self Transcended." The whip, the rope, the person, and the ox all merge into no thing. The heaven is so vast, no message can stain it. How may a snowflake exist in a raging fire? Here are the of the ancestors. So this eighth pictures of nothing. There's nothing there. I mean, I know there's a circle, but it's representing nothing. This is the substance. The your truest nature is this absolute nothing, or absolute zero. I mean, you could there's lots of labels you could attach to it. Emptiness, void, the formless. You know, different teachers use different words, but they're all speaking generally, most often, about the same thing when they use these types of words.
Can we compare this to, or is it the same as non duality?
Um, what would you have to say? Because I don't want to interpret what you're going to say. So can you give me an example?
Well, if the substance is nothing, there is no substance, that seems a lot like the Hindu concept of non-duality, and that's, I think, why they use the term non-duality, because even saying nothingness implies a kind of somethingness. So what they're trying to describe is an emptiness that is so great that you can't even use words to describe it, because words are inherently dual.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what this is saying too. That um, you could say non-dual, right? If you're describing non-dual in the way you're describing it.
Does the so the part that says the here lies the footprints of the ancestors, does that mean that everyone has walked this path and you can see them all before you?
Um, I don't think it would be in a physical way of seeing. I think
No, no, of
what
course not.
I think what they're talking about when they say ancestors are, yeah, the people um that you would look at and say uh this person has been enlightened, is has reached enlightenment. So therefore that's what it's saying. Yeah, here are the footprints of the ancestors. This is what they also have found. This is the um, through this process, this is where it has led them to this non-duality. My notes was funny that Lauren said that. My next set of notes was cannot be described or depicted, and so a mere circle is shown. It's just blank, nothing, because it can't be described or depicted.
Yeah.
So, but something that kind of confuses me, although it's called a void, it's also related to fire. So does that mean that it's a it's a state or a form of existence that moves that changes so much that there is no change?
The fire part of the poem, I'll read it again. It says, "How may a snowflake exist in a raging fire. This sort of is just pointing to the mind cannot make something out of it because of its nature. So if you could imagine the snowflake as mind and this void that cannot be described or depicted, that's like the raging fire. It's just a simile, just a way of saying that it instantly melts. There's nothing. It can't be grasped. Uh, yeah.
One of our new people, another shadow, asked if nothingness is the same as the state of sleep, and how can you learn and have awakening if you do not exist? Which is, I think, a fairly common uh, interpretation of nothingness. It's like, how can you experience nothingness?
You cannot.
Elaborate.
Specify what you mean by you.
Well, you brought up you, so I mean that's the ball. The ball's in your field, sir.
Actually, Shadow brought up you, but no, it's not going to make any sense from the perspective of a self. If you're saying that, I understand language is slippery here, but Sunyata is about transcending the slipperiness of language.
I can say something because at that point, to say that you experience nothingness would be false because you would be experiencing not only the nothingness but yourself, and so at that point you wouldn't be experiencing nothingness. You would be experiencing two things: one, the void, and the other, yourself.
Yeah, I like to think of it as either there's nothing or there's two things, which goes back to duality. But an analogy I like to an analogy I like to use is it would be like I love using the analogy of music, and it would be like trying to tell someone about silence using music, uh, and you can only really experience it when there is no music. So you can't use sound to describe or to experience silence.
So yeah, I thought about this um, earlier today. So Shadow is asking, is nothingness you describe similar to a state of sleep? Um, yes and no. It isn't that because that would also be a way of describing or depicting it. This is the trouble, you know. Even the question is uh, is not helpful. You're asking me to take a box of crayons and draw a black and white picture. I can't do it because I only have colors. I can't. I just
Are
can't do
you
it.
is the conversation about practically how to like maximize like the state of nothingness or like achieve absolute nothing?
I think we're just describing what nothingness is.
Well,
It's
we're talking about this set of pictures, which um, describe the process of um, enlightenment. But currently, we're discussing this eighth picture, which is no thing,
it's
nothingness, void, emptiness, non-dual.
lack of change. So with your attention, if you focus your attention on like nothingness, you can start to wrap your head around what that state is. If you stare at something for long enough, if it were physically possible to keep your eyes still, literally would your whatever you visualize would literally just bleed away into like blackness. Because your eyes have to see deltas in order to render vision and your visual cortex. If there's no change, your brain literally filters out the visual signal, which is why your eyes constantly move around. Like nothingness is just like no change. If you meditate and you focus your attention on nothing, you might get to that state. I don't know if you can like absolutely achieve it. That possibly is impossible, but you can maximize it pretty easily, or you can wrap your head around it. I think just focus your attention on nothing. Stare at like a microphone or a wall for long enough, and you'll see. If you can stand enough, you'll see what nothingness is.
Well, this would be um, even further than that, because if you're seeing black, then that is something.
Uh, the void has a color, I guess I would say. uh,
Yeah. So this is even going further than that.
I don't think that's human possible.
It's
Or
another
mere exist.
analogy that I like that I've heard before is taking like a cartoon, like a comic that's done in black and white with just lines, and erasing all of the lines so that the characters no longer exist. The background of the comic doesn't exist. The lines separating these things have all just been erased.
Yeah, that's a good analogy too.
I
Right.
I
So,
was I have the okay. I'm sorry. You can.
no, sorry, you go. Apologies.
Um. So this is actually a question I've had a while back. Is so? Are you aware of this nothingness, or is it just kind of this blackout state where you go into it and then you wake up and you're like, what the fuck happened?
Who is that question directed towards?
I guess to the whole chat, but I don't
Yeah.
know, probably Zen.
So I'm curious too, like for whoever said there's some meta level of nothingness, can you describe it?
Well, no, that's exactly what we're talking about. This eighth picture of the circle is formless. It cannot be described. It cannot be depicted because um, it lacks even a perceiver. It lacks the essence of awareness. So it is a lot like being in deep sleep. You don't even know that you're there.
So have you personally navigated, I guess, down these different levels of nothingness?
Um, yeah, I've had an experience within meditation. If that's what you're referring to,
Yeah.
there is a there is a there is a state of non-stateness that you can not experience. That happens through meditation.
How do you imagine you've experienced it if you can't describe it? Like,
Sure. Yeah, that seems paradoxical, right? How would you know? So there would be an experience before the non event, and there would be a time period that um, would be blank, and then there would be the reappearance of the forms that that is reality. So basically, it would be reality, and then it would be as if the frames of a movie were taken out, and then there would be the reappearance of reality.
So it's just blacking out and waking up essentially.
the
Not really, sort of, but yeah, you could describe it that way, but it's not really blacking out.
There are slices that that are gone, very small slices of time.
So how's that difference, for instance, if I'm just sitting here, I'm really tired, I was like watching a YouTube video, I like nod off, and then I wake up and I realize like, holy crap, I was like asleep like half an hour or an hour or something, and
You're
realize that happened.
because you would wake up with a shattered ego.
Oh, like ego death?
Ego death was
I mean,
earlier.
I would say so.
Okay, ego death. Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Okay,
I
that's
mean the
interesting.
awareness is a big part of it. So that would be the difference I think between that and sleep is that uh you're still receiving sensations. Um, you're not unconscious of these things. You, not that there's a you, of course, but there is awareness of the sounds and sights and everything. It's just that there's no mind identifying any of it or picking it out, so that all of reality turns into a seamless thing. And your awareness is a part of that. And so there's no you anymore because there's no thoughts about you. That existence just doesn't happen, and there's no reflecting on it, like what is this emptiness, even those thoughts don't happen. It's just a total absence of these things, and so reality becomes completely seamless without any lines or separation.
Uh, I'm familiar there. I didn't know you were talking about like ego death.
So the next two pictures, is that basically life after this event of nothingness? And to for another question, what is the state of mind of this person afterwards? Is it just back to normal, back where he started, or is it like they have merged with the void in that they are now they now are this person of void?
So the last three pictures are not new steps or stages. Um, one isn't experience. Well, these aren't experiences in the same as what we had spoke before of like the experience of maybe stream entry. These are the processes that are um, ongoing. Um, so the eighth one, the circle, is this is what the substance, the foundation, um, what experience is made of, and it's made of that emptiness, that void, that formless, that non-duality. But even to call it a substance doesn't really uh, hit to the mark.
Ooh, I thought of another analogy that I really like. I don't know why I like analogies so much, but it's kind of like what the back of your head looks like to your eyes. It's
Yeah,
not black. It's not black like if you close your eyes and you see black. There's just nothingness. There's no white either. It's just a total absence.
yeah, and if you don't try and think about it, right? If you don't try to form it into a thought or an image in your head, then that's what it is. That's good. Good on you, Lord. So that's the substance. That's what it's made out of. And then the ninth picture, because these aren't stages, these aren't steps.
Right.
These
Yeah,
are all, yeah.
that was my question: is what is life afterwards?
We can get
I,
to that.
I
I
would
want
I
to
would just like to
clear the
interject
picture.
something here, can I, for a second?
Sure.
Originally, when the 10 bulls were constructed, they were the 8 bulls, and and for a couple hundred years it stayed that way. But there was sort of a dissatisfaction with ending everything with that big nothing, that circle, and it wasn't even entirely accurate. So a few hundred years into, these pictures have been circulating for a long, long time. I mean, I'd have to look to be sure, but I'm gonna guess 1,000 years. I could be off basis. I can find out for sure. The point is, after a few hundred years, they decided to expand the set out to 10. That's just something I came across, Mike. Tossing it in there.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that. I had like only taken 2 days to do research and put notes together. So there were a lot of things that I wanted to add into the notes that I just didn't have time to do. So moving on to the ninth picture, which is the sort of the serene picture of the mountains and forests. This is titled Reaching the Source. And the poem, it goes along with it. Too many steps have been taken. Returning to the root of the source, better to have been blind and deaf from the beginning. Dwelling in one's true abode, unconcerned with and without. The river flows tranquil onward, and the flowers are red. So the poem's saying, I've taken so many steps to return to this source, and I would have been better, would have been better off just being blind and deaf from the beginning. I think that mainly points towards like because there's uh, these sense doors, there's seeing and hearing and feeling. That if these were cut off, I probably would have had a little bit easier time figuring this out, getting to this place, um, and dwelling in one's true abode in that source, unconcerned about having or not having. This is not concerned with it at all. Um, and then the last part is, I think, aimed towards this picture, this drawing, and it is just the river flows onward, and the flowers are red. That's it.
And I would just like to add in here from, my experience and what I've read, it's the mountain is the mountain again. It's that cherished duality that Lauren is talking about so much. The mountain is the mountain again. The river is the river again. The grass is the grass again. But you no longer have just a purely conceptual understanding of that. You're experiencing these things almost from a perspective of a toddler, finding joy, simple joy in the world again, almost from a childhood beginner's mind. Um, Suzuki once said. So.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, that's a uh, perfect place to put that quote. Would be, where the mountains no longer are the mountains and the rivers are no longer the rivers. And then once this process happens, there's this seeing that the mountains become the mountains again and the rivers become the rivers. But they're just the mountains and they're just the rivers as they are without any overlaying on top of them, without any conceptualizing on top of them.
Exactly. You're actually experiencing the mountain as a mountain for the first time. You're not looking up in your brain's not saying mountain and jumping to categorizations. You're actually experiencing it um, as what it is, as pure existence.
But then
So
how do you describe the flowers as being red then?
I'd like to think that's an artistic flourish.
yeah, I think it's just an artistic thing because you're not bound by that. Actually, you're not bound by calling a thing red.
But you do still
And
see it
again,
as
your
red?
your mind isn't slotting it away as red flower, as red as a property that the flower possesses, and like many other properties. Instead, the flower is red.
Instead of it being immediately brought up into your mind that this flower is red, you can see it as red. And then if someone asks, hey, what color is that flower? Oh, it's red.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we're not in
So
nothingness
you're
There's
seeing a
anymore.
no
mountain.
conceptual pre-processing between your mind and the world anymore. You've taken down all those filters, and so there is red is not an attribute that flower possesses. Rather, that red and that flower are the same thing because you've removed conceptual differentiation.
So going through that process of the the void and the two uh, the next two parts of the story, would that be basically describing how this person has now a new appreciation of existence, and it's not because of some hidden knowledge, but because that it's it's a gift to see, essentially.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
that term gift. Don't you?
yeah, I would agree with that. Actually, Guy, that's spot on. Yeah.
I would add that, I mean, you yourself are an example of a very, almost radically different kind of existence in and of yourself. You're not experiencing any of this um, the way you used to. You were very much like the mind of a child, which we say, oh, they're very simple, or kids just speak their minds, haha, the shit kids say. But they're actually experiencing the world in one constant flow state almost, and they experience it very honestly, and they experience it very accurately in a way that we've kind of lost with our increasing sophistication as we age.
So describing this ninth picture, um, I said this is ninth picture sort of represents the form. So the void, I'll just, it doesn't really matter what word I use, but we'll call it the void or non-duality, whichever one people are comfortable with the most. Doesn't really matter. So that's nothing, the less than nothing. And so why is there all these things? Why can I look out and see the 10,000 things? This is because when this nothing or this void moves, shimmers, vibrates, it changes, it becomes, it moves into form. It the vibration or shimmer uh, of this nothing
I really,
is
really like that.
the appearance of this ordinary reality that you're experiencing. Um, when and it stops being nothing in a sense, um, it becomes an appearance of form.
I really like the shimmer concept of it. And this,
Yeah,
so this goes into impermanence, change.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm just throwing labels on it.
Sort of everything is in a state of becoming.
I mean, that's what a form is, right? Is a label.
Right, right, right. Change, jeez.
Yeah. So
Vibration.
this,
That's what vibration
yeah,
is.
yeah, exactly. So this void, it it moves, it has movement, it vibrates, it shimmers, it um, again, these are concepts, but that's it's movement. And because of the movement, it sort of, this is like the wave and the trough. It has this movement, and it um, sort of shoots up into becoming form, and then recesses back into being the void. This is um, what we experience, or we might say, most people would say, this is reality. This is why you can knock on a table. There's sensation, sound, and an appearance. And through meditation, the technique of the noting technique that I had spoken about a couple weeks ago, if you pay very, very close attention, you can use your concentration to focus on the moment of the arising, or the opposite, the moment of it passing away. So, this moment that arises out of the nothingness in um, comes in contact with a sense door, you can see this vibration. You can see that what's actually happening is reality is strobing in and out extremely quickly, to make what appears to be continuity.
It sounds like the brain is basically at the very end of this is just operating as it should, where it receives and then it uh, stops receiving, kind of in a very efficient way.
Um, why why does it say too many steps have been taken and it would be better to have been blind and deaf from the beginning?
You'll
Yeah.
feel that way.
You'll feel that way. Yes, absolutely. Um,
because you
that's a really good.
realize because you realize how much it is, how how much of a gift it is to see, to to realize that life as it is perfect, and you didn't have to go through all of that to realize it.
Um, yeah, exactly. I mean, think of all the thrashing and difficult paths you took, you had to take, but there's going to be this moment to get there, that way of seeing. But your initial reaction is going to be, this is it? This is what the hell they were talking about the entire time? Oh my God, it's not like they missold it or anything. It's almost like it was just everything had a double meaning. And at least it was for me. That's a very common reaction, is say, this is enlightenment? This is Satori? Uh, yeah, but it's not nothing. Sorry, we're talking about nothingness. I shouldn't use that. But as another a guy who's actually a Western philosopher who dabbles in meditation, or has since the late '60s, he says it's not any of these ideas you have about enlightenment. It's not, you're not the wise old man on the mountain or anything like that. You're still going to get pissed off. All this other, the world will um, the world will take its pound of flesh. But at the same time, it's not nothing. It's something. You're a hell of a lot better off with it, and having had this experience and being able to tap this experience again than you ever would have been in 100 lifetimes not having seen that. And in the Dhammapada, it has a chapter called Thousands, that where Gautama basically is just playing with numbers in a poetic sense, and it's better this for a single day than this for this state of being for 1,000 years, and it goes on like that. And you find yourself sort of nodding to the parts you can understand, and then puts the others in perspective.
Yeah. Um, exactly. So the poem "Too Many Steps Have Been Taken," returning to the root of the source, exactly what Shal was saying. Um, this is a real experience. This is something that really can happen. It's true. This isn't mind games, okay? It's real. When it does happen, you're going to be like, wow, the fairy tale was true all along. Like, uh, uh, you're just sort of stuck in like mind blown.
You may have thought about it as a fairy tale before, because no, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So whatever you think it's like, all of that's not true. Like, you will have a good, yeah, you'll have, let me put it this way. You have lots of ideas about what it is, what it's like. some of those things may be close, but you're not going to know. You're not going to know until you're there, until it happens, until you experience it. You're not going to know. You're not going to know where you were right and where you were wrong. So um the reason why it says too many steps have been taken is because it is simple beyond simple. You will laugh at yourself because it is so simple. Yeah, like uh, you're either going to cry or you're going to laugh. That's what it is.
I laughed.
Yeah, yeah, you'll have looked, and not that any of these steps or this process
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
useful.
that's what I'm about to. From in retrospect, it's going to look like you wasted a lot of time and energy.
Yeah.
But you would have never gotten there without taking all these very difficult.
Then
Yes, yes,
why?
exactly. You will feel in a way that you wasted a lot of time because it's simple beyond simple. But you will also, um, yeah, you will also be like, every single thing that happened and every single thing I did, every single time down to meditate, every single minute that I spent meditating or focusing was absolutely 100% necessary and could not have happened any other way.
And that includes misunderstandings, false starts, complete screw ups, periods of self delusion. All of these things absolutely necessary to screw up that bad the entire every step of the way.
If it's necessary, then why does it say too many steps have been taken?
Well, that's the first thing you're gonna think, either when you laugh or cry. I can't imagine crying, but laughing for sure. And and the first thing you think is, "Wow, I took the long way up the mountain." But really, there is no short way up the mountain. So, you've got to
Yeah.
screw up. It's as with learning anything else. Meditation is really no different than any other human acquired skill. Um, if you're a computer programmer, you had to make those mistakes in order not to make them anymore. I mean, or just to lead to more productive avenues of exploration that really worked out for you. Taekwondo, if you've ever taken karate, man, you just got to get dumped on your ass a few times before you really understand the sort of the hidden nature of fighting. And it's like that with fishing. It's like that with everything you've ever been good at in your life. You have to. Imagine being an awesome skateboarder the first time you see a skate. Hell no. You're going to skin your knees. You're going to fall down. You're going to cry. You're going to throw that skateboard. You're not going to want to do it anymore. But eventually, there is a payoff, and the payoff in this instance is huge.
Do you guys think it's better to have been blind and deaf from the beginning? You think it's better to have not gone down this path?
No, no, no. The
No.
blind and deaf, the blind and deaf, it's better to have been blind and deaf from the beginning. Meaning, uh, I, I feel like it's saying blind and deaf, meaning you wouldn't have those sense doors activated. Like it would have taken less time for somebody to be blind and deaf because the seeing and the hearing, in a way, impinge on um, seeing reality clearly, um, quicker, possibly.
And
It's
and it may
realizing.
actually just be a little bit of hyperbole there. Again, poetic license. Um, yeah, I could see. I've never really heard of it, but I mean, I guess somebody could go back. Again, this is. I feel like this is really talking about the immediate aftermath. You get up off the floor,
Yeah,
and you look around, and you're like, "This was so simple. The entire I could have been doing this the entire time. I wish I would have never taken all the. I had to take all those many steps, but it's going to occur to you very quickly that it could have been no other way."
yeah. That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah, this is sort of the thoughts and aftermath. Exactly.
It's basically saying that this nothingness that he that he's achieved, he kind of, now that he understands what it is, um, to he's basically expressing how basically trying to stay in that state would be ridiculous. And if I wanted to stay in that state, then I would be better off blind and deaf in order to be that way. But he realizes later on, not even later on, at that moment, that I have so much, that life is such a great thing.
The
That's really
overwhelming
it.
feeling, I think, is one of, maybe it's just me, relief. Mike, would you?
Relief, absolutely relief. There was a just huge like waves, one big giant wave, and then just like waves and waves of relief hit, like I could feel it in my body, of relief. Like, oh, fucking finally.
I played with sunlight for like hours coming through a window, just amazed. It it really is like waking up to a completely heightened sense of existence. It's almost beyond words, but I mean, take your happiest moment and just amplify the hell out of it, and it can go on. Like Mike said, I mean, looking back, we're like, oh man, I only got 4 days, and then I had to relapse into this shit. But wow, what an amazing 4 days! And it's said that when Confucius attained this state, um, he forgot to eat, and he almost died. He forgot to eat. He forgot to drink. He just played his lyre. Gautama, because he didn't have any what he would call homemaker responsibilities, um, he got to stay in here for something like 43 days or something like that. I wish if I could go back. Oh my God, if I could just go back to that initial melt up. That would have been so great to get to just stay there. And you're not gonna like necessarily fall back immediately. This is a very long experience, and that's, I mean, that's what's so freaking cool about it.
So, with the better to be blind and deaf, I don't want to keep beating this dead horse, but it is referring to the ninth picture, the scenic picture. And I think also another part of this, because I think it could have multiple meanings, is that looking out at like the scenery and stuff, he's saying better to be blind and deaf because you wouldn't have those concepts placed on top of what you're seeing, the physical world.
So you would just come to this stage quicker if you were blind and deaf? Is that the only way that it's better?
Maybe. Maybe not. I think it's just
I
really
don't
saying
think if
like
you were
the
literally blind
identification.
and deaf, it's almost like a wistful thing is how I read it. You know, he's, oh man, better that I was blind and deaf than have
I
to
know. So
go about it the way I did.
this is why I keep bringing. I'm kind of stuck here because it seems like a kind of craving still. Like, why does it matter how many steps you took? Why is there a rush? Why did you need to get here sooner than you already did? Why is it better to have been blind and deaf than what you went through?
It's relating the the void itself. It's not relating to the whole journey behind it necessarily. Like if if I wanted to, if I was in this state of, man, I need something and I couldn't find that thing that would satisfy me, but when I would go into religion and they talk about that there's this thing that would completely satisfy you, and I'm like, okay, all right, let's try to find this thing. And so I go through it, this whole process of getting there. And at last, I've got it. And I realize it's not what I want. And because of knowing that you've gotten to that step, you go back to that normal reality and realize, man, what I had in the beginning was already great. That's I mean, that's really it, isn't it?
We need to be careful here, though, because there are schools. I call them schools loosely. Really, what they are is like a plague of locusts on the entire experiment, who will go around and tell you there's nothing to attain. You're already born with Buddha nature. Ergo, there's no grasping, nothing to do, blah blah blah. And this is a case of information that is absolutely true at one level, but at another level is pure poison.
Yeah, I went over that earlier, which just kind of is funny. I don't think I was here, and now he's saying the exact same thing. I said it in around, I think it was like the fifth picture, and I said it's extremely, extremely important to be um, honest, and so like getting trapped in that, oh, there's nothing to do, there's nothing to obtain, you're already there, is like being in the middle of a river and throwing your oar overboard, and just you're not, the river's just going to take you down the river and you're never going to get to the other side. So you have to be extremely careful. um, this is one thing that probably shouldn't have really, I mean, you can't really stop it, but it's detrimental to your progress. Um, but anyway, should we should we move on to the 10th picture, and then we can just kind of like discuss whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So the 10th picture is returning to society. Um, the poem goes with it is barefooted and naked of breast. I mingle with the people of the world. My clothes are ragged and dust laden, and I am ever blissful. I use no magic to extend my life. Now, before me, the dead trees become alive. So, this is the last picture. Like I said, these three pictures sort of go together and represent the first one, the substance, the second one, the form, and the last one is the purpose. What is the purpose of enlightenment? And this would be that.
Um, Something that's kind of curious about the poem on this picture is that it mentions magic, and I I just I don't know. Is is it does this person have is this person now a wizard?
No,
No. Sorry, Mike.
it's okay. It's just a way of saying that they don't care if they die. Like there's no um need to extend with magic my life, meaning they're perfectly happy with life and however much life that they have left.
But he's got magic though, right?
No, 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 sorry, no magic.
Damn it.
You'll have to go look somewhere else. This is not about magic.
This is actually the most difficult. I know they're not stages, but to me, I call it perspectives. Um, this is the one that's pretty much the real challenge for me is how do you integrate this? This picture represents a more or less complete reintegration with your day-to-day existence, after the rapture of the laundry. And that's where I get hung up. I know I'm not alone getting hung up there, but it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of effort and dedication. And there's really, we showed 10 bull pictures, but it seems like we're describing definite states with a top and a bottom, and that's all there is, and all that. There is really no upper bound on enlightenment. There is no one so perfect or so perfectly enlightened that meditation couldn't sharpen them up a little more, unless they're walking around always in a state of meditation. And that is the goal, is to basically bring more of this back with you. Someone in the Nomic channel asked me, I think it was Mr. Mime, he asked me, so is the deal to basically keep passing over into this state, crashing back through, and having to claw your way back to it? And I said, yeah, you get to stay a little longer every time.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So the my notes here on the 10th picture is helping others to reach this understanding out of compassion, knowing the source of uh, all suffering. So knowing the source from where suffering comes from, you're able to help them move towards this understanding, this position, this location. And this process, this last picture is exactly what Chow is saying. This isn't something that's done and over with. This is a lifelong process of integrating these understandings and living this uh, from this place.
I would like to add, now once you've done it once, it's never it's never quite as difficult ever again. And I know I've said that, but I really want to underline it here. All you have to do is get across the stream once. That's not all you have to do, but what I'm saying is once you get there, the entire game will change for you. It won't be anywhere near a struggle. You'll struggle with certain realizations and certain levels, but it won't be where you're just pretty much hoping and praying and imagining, and I'm sort of taking it on faith that it's there. Now that you know it's there, it, you will always have that I can go back. I don't have to stay in this sort of shitty low level understanding of the world, reacting da 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 da, and it's not closed off to me. The door doesn't have a lock on it.
So how when you struggle to integrate this into your life, is that different from kind of slipping between the 4, 5, and 6 stages where you have kind of the white ox, but you might slip back towards the half brown ox, for instance?
Right. I mean that can happen. After your first time, it's much more likely that after a few weeks you're just going to crash right back to the first picture. I mean, you really do sometimes have to start over from scratch. It's an iterative process. You're not always going to land 3 steps up. I mean, it depends what happens to you in your life and how successful you are at integrating this experience, so much so that this experience becomes your experience of existence all the time. That's a very, very high bar.
So then it sounds like it's about coming to an understanding of the journey, and rather than trying to rather than always training the mind, essentially. At least that's what it sounds like to me, where it's about. Hold on, let me try to bring up what I'm thinking. But you guys talk. I'll.
I was just going to say, I've been stuttering the whole time. Don't worry about it, man. Get neurological and a bit more real in our terminology. I see it as a kind of reset to factory standard. I mean, to a factory reset. Like if you've got to reset your computer, it says basically the brain has certain software you can reset, and that's probably not a perfect analogy. And I try to avoid computer software hardware analogies, but it's very much what it is. You're seeing the world with truly new eyes. Same old world, but a very different set of eyes on the subject.
Um, I'm going to be very bold here and say I haven't experienced a crash after the
Damn you, Mike. Damn you.
but I'm not saying that it can't happen. I don't know. I'm not going to say that it couldn't, but I haven't experienced that.
I was kidding. Yeah, Mike hasn't come down, lucky bastard.
And so when you haven't come down, that's when you are at stage 7, right? And if you're still crashing back, you're kind of fluctuating between 4 and 6. And I know they're not like definitive, but just to use to try to talk about it. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. And I mean, again, Mike says he's never crashed. Um, we've seen people crash, and Mike is very. All jokes aside, Mike is extraordinarily fortunate, and he's probably put a. I know he's put a lot of effort, or maybe no effort. I know it can get slippery, but you know what I mean. He's put a lot of dedication behind it. Um, most people, hey, you're gonna crash. It's at 99 times out of 100, you're gonna have your week in the sun, and then life. I saw something on The Sopranos. I can't really quote, but in it, Tony Soprano, he goes to a psychiatrist, and he's had this big awakening in his life where he can finally see things how they really are, and it's very transformative. But all of life's little annoyances, he said, life will just chisel away at that shit till you can't even remember what it was that you found, and that that is a challenge. Um, I know it has been for me.
Um, Mike, uh, would you say that you at this where you are now is that is the reason why you haven't crashed all the way back down to the point where you originally started? Was that you because of what you've developed over the years, or was it that you've come to this understanding about yourself that has kept you functioning, like the way that you want to, essentially?
I wish I could tell you, wish I could tell you why. Like, why is it different? Or give you the thing that made it the way it is, but I don't know. I really don't know. Um, I, if I had to say that it was something, I mean, this is just a guess, that it's this um, stage 6, that it's that complete surrendering. And so it would be that, just not grasping again. And I can't really tell you how to do that. And this is just a guess. So ultimately, I don't know. And again, like what Shao said, I don't know if in the future that will happen. I don't. All I can tell you is it's been 6 months, almost 7 months since that uh, last event happened. There were 2 weeks
You're talking
that
about your
it was
third
a,
AMP.
yeah, it was an event. All I'm going to say is it was pretty crazy.
Yeah,
And
they're nuts.
there was 2 week period where I was in this very, very heightened state of, I guess, consciousness, of whatever word you want to use. I can't really, no word's going to describe it. It felt like being connected and disconnected simultaneously with everything. And that did fade. It took about 2 weeks, but it didn't fade. It sort of, it felt more like it became uh, the norm. It wasn't as apparent because it felt it normalized um, than a fading. Like if you go into a hot tub, you become acclimatized to the water, the hot water, so it feels normal. That's what it felt like.
I have a strange question for you, I guess. If you wanted to, do you think that you could crash
That's a good
on
question.
purpose?
That is a good question.
I would say yes from my experience, but I'm still trying to integrate it. So, Mike, could you crash?
Um, sorry, Shao. What was your question?
Could you crash
Could I?
On purpose.
on purpose? Could you make the conscious? In my experience, you can.
If it was on
I got
purpose, would
lost
it
in a
be a
flow state.
crash?
Oh yeah, it feels like one. I've been in a flow state, basically Tao, for 9 months at a time before, and I intentionally crashed out of that for someone else's sake. I don't recommend it. If I could go back and do it again, I sure as hell wouldn't. Um, I don't think the world is going to try every method of bringing you down anyway. And Mike's experience, it's not unheard of, but it's unusual. The usual thing is for you to have to run this cycle a lot.
I don't have an answer. Could I? I don't know. I guess I would have to do it to know if I could or not.
Yeah,
Do
I
it.
mean, who would want to do it, right?
No, I'm
Do
good.
it.
I'm good.
Controlled landing.
What are you? What are you? What are you? A chicken? What are you? A chicken?
Sure.
Um,
I'll be a chicken. I'm just gonna hang out here.
Don't do it, man.
Mike,
No.
I have a
Yeah.
question. Um, do you still experience suffering?
These are all tough
Um.
questions.
Yeah, these are good questions. You will have to define what you mean.
Uh, yeah, I guess what we've meant, how we used it earlier in the conversation.
Something as
The
apart
state.
from pain, probably.
I would define it as persistence of a fear or pain or essentially anything.
No fear. Um. Bodily pain, of course. That's that's just normal. No fear, no worry, no anxiety.
I will say, in my experience, having it been 6 or 7 months um, that Mike's been able to maintain this, to crash out now would be extraordinarily painful in every sense. I mean, almost like a physical ache from the deepest place within you. It shouldn't be. I would, yeah. It's not something you're gonna want to do once you get there. In fact, the opposite's probably true.
How about on the opposite end? Do you what is pleasure like for you? Essentially, do things taste sweeter? Do um, are are happy memories even more joyful?
Guy, you have a lot of really good questions today.
These are amazing questions. No, I wouldn't say. I would say no. Not in the way that you're. Not in the way that you're saying it. Um, that whatever experiences are happening are just whatever the way that they are. You know, I eat a grape and it tastes like a grape. um, I wouldn't say it's more sweet. It just is whatever the taste of the grape is.
Do you taste it more fully than you would have in the past? That's a really I don't think you could answer that question.
Yeah, that's a
But
question I can't answer. Uh, the experience is the same as the way Mike experienced it before, it's just there is no worry, anxiety. Mike feels very safe.
So you don't have any craving or desire for anything?
No, I mean, there's still like I wake up and there is, oh, I enjoy coffee in the morning. I wouldn't really call that desire. So if I woke up and I was out of coffee, then I would be out of coffee. I wouldn't be upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
It'd just
Yeah.
be out of coffee. It sounds simple because it is. And that's why I laugh.
And you don't get like frustrated with like traffic or some mundane task that isn't working out,
Or you
Yeah,
don't wake up
no.
one morning and you're like, damn it, I want fucking ice cream.
No, not like that. No, I don't get frustrated in traffic. Um, there are people that drive past and like cut me off, and so like there can be a feeling of like a natural body reaction of sort of a jolt of um, could be like fear, but it's more of a bodily reaction. You know what I'm talking about? Like you drop something heavy and it like lands by your toe and you're like kind of jump a little bit. Like that stuff kind of still happens, but it what I don't really I wouldn't consider that fear.
It's more of a reflex, really.
It's more reflex.
Is everything that you experience um, vastly more organized you've than you were than things were in the past?
Um, I would say yes. Organized in a way only because everything is exactly where it should be. So it has there could be like a feeling of things are organized because they aren't unorganized.
But do you still have a desire to like clean things and organize things around you?
Mm, at work, I do. I keep my area organized because it's efficient.
But you wouldn't call that a desire to organize it?
I wouldn't.
Maybe not in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, there. I guess there are multiple definitions of what desire would be, but I mean, shit. So in the sense that when it comes to this whole 10 bowls story, how um or no, not just this whole process of going into enlightenment and trying to face your desires or trying to relinquish them or something like that. Those things are more long-term persistent things or persistent desires. If you it, if you have something that you want right now, that wouldn't be necessarily a desire if you can easily go get it. Like if it's like a short-term thing. If it's something that I want to be the greatest person ever and no one could top me, that's a long-term desire, and I would say that would be closer to something that you should be worried about.
Well, I
Yeah, I
suppose the
think that's a
real
useful dichotomy.
um I would have made the separation along the lines of uh if you don't get this thing that you desire, will you suffer? So, if your
Yeah.
area wasn't organized, would that bother you?
Right. That's what I was going to say. So I left for a week, and my coworkers had to come into my area, and they used tools and they didn't put them back. There wasn't a frustration or anger or anything that came up because I walked into my space and it was disorganized. It just was. It was just that way. Like, I'm not blaming anybody for that. That's just what happened. They took tools and they put them back in the wrong place or just set them down on the table and didn't bother putting them back. There wasn't a upsetness that came from that. I just put things back. That's it.
Did you mention it to them that they should have done it or something like
No,
that?
no, not at all. No, I just put things back. They actually apologized to me. I didn't even say anything. They're like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I know things are unorganized. We were busy and stuff like that." And I was like, "No, okay, no problem."
I'll bill you later.
Right. Yeah. So tools are organized at work because it's efficient because there's a job to be done and there's time limits on that job. So having things uh, organized makes that more efficient to meet that goal. But there isn't this need um, for things to be that way if they're not.
Are would you say that um, experience is a lot more quiet than before?
Yeah, I would say that it does have a quality of quietness. Yeah, like a stillness to it.
So, so if I were to go through this whole thing and be like, "Hey, I want to learn magic now because that all my problems are gone away, that I can that maybe I can do some crazy shit now." Would that be ridiculous?
Um, so I never really was interested in that part of it. I have only read and heard that it can be a part of it. So
That's
I
really
can't
all
really give you
Macchio,
an
though, isn't
answer.
it?
I don't, I have no experience or no interest in any of that. So I can't really answer your question. But all I can say is that that's what I have heard, that there are pieces that sort of go into what might be labeled as magic, but I don't even know how to define that in any way.
So why is the 10th step, or is it even necessary?
No, it's just an aftermath.
So the 10th
Exactly.
step is sort of the um how to put this. The 10th step is just a natural um geez, word is escaping.
It's like if you were if enlightenment was a chemical reaction, these are the products of that reaction.
Yeah, it's just you care more. you you care about people more, and so therefore you'd want to help them, and because you have gone through this process, you now know its benefits and how much it has helped you directly, so you would want to help others move towards that, and because you know it'll be helpful for them.
Mike, just for clarification, this most recent time, 6 or 7 months ago, this is not your first rodeo, yes?
No, not the first one time.
I know that. I was just making it clear. Was it third, something like that, third AMP event?
Yeah. So a couple weeks ago we talked when about meditation, and I kind of related some of the story up to this point. And so there was that first initial one, which was spontaneous, and then there was another one at the private monastery that I spent a month at, and then after that, I kind of reintegrated sort of back into everyday life, getting a job and stuff, and then daily practice, and then so uh, 6 7 months ago, this was like the so far, this is the last uh, time it's happened. I can't speak about the future, but this is what it feels like to me.
And what is A and P is arising and passing away?
That's correct.
And what does that mean?
I'm trying to actually separate like the clinical definition of an AMP event from the completely upside down, balls to the wall experience of experiencing an AMP event. It is, um, Mike, feel free to step in at any time. I could tell you what happened during an AMP event. Um, I don't know. It's an extremely wild ride. Technically, it means arising and passing away.
What is it that's arising?
I think that the AMP, or rising passing away, refers to the understanding or insight arises, and through or from that, old sort of behaviors or perceptions are given up or drop away, hence the passing away. I think that's what the term means. It's really a label, and you could say Satori or Kinsho. It's they're all speaking about the same thing, but it's just a different label.
Wouldn't you say that the AMP event is actually sort of like, it's actually pre-satori, pre-fruition, wouldn't you?
Um, it's difficult because these things don't come with their labels. They don't come pre-labeled.
From a practical perspective, if um, if you're having an AMP event, it's um, it's pretty trippy. There's likely to be hallucinations. Maybe some of them actually aren't hallucinations. You're tuning up. You're right before that big breakthrough, and that's usually the kind of behavior we're talking about when we say AMP event. If somebody comes in and describes, say, on the Dharma Overground, something that happened to them, and it's truly wild but not fictitious, we would say, "Oh, okay, AMP event. That's pretty typical." And as far as what the experience actually consists of, it varies a little from person to person, except that it's you won't be going into work in the middle of it, or I mean, yeah, maybe you would, but you wouldn't. It's going to interrupt your life a little bit. It's going to unfold sort of like a flower. It's going to have its day, and I don't know. It took me off my feet for about. I didn't do anything approaching responsibility while I was going through any of this.
Yeah, um, it, I guess it could be described or categorized as sort of a mystical experience, or what somebody may would apply to a what a mystical experience would be.
Something happening to you.
Yeah, something happening to you.
Yeah, you're definitely
Um,
along for the ride.
it's probably better to just
Something
tell.
sort of happening through you at the same time, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it might be just better to give an example and say this is an example. This isn't what is going to happen to you. This is just what happened to me, and it's going to be very likely going to be something completely different if you experience it. Did you want? I'm talking a lot, and do you want to share? You don't have to, Shao, but do you feel like you would want to share a piece of
Oh Jesus, man, that's long.
well, I don't know, just take
Okay, what would I?
interesting part.
So at the time, I was in something that um, we tend to refer to as the Dark Knight. Um, we refer to it that way because it's awful. You've never been lower in your life. I mean, I don't like to put the word suicidal with it, but let's just say that you're pretty bad off. Um, Now, having had a previous experience with Taoism, essentially being in Tao for 9 months, um, it was just sort of myself couldn't take it anymore. Couldn't take myself anymore. It was either gonna blow us all up or whatever. Um, so much so that I'd even say it was sort of fractured. And that's why I like to tell a lot of people who just pop in. I say, enlightenment is the Satori is the product of crisis. If you think you're going to get here smooth and easy way, that's I wish it could be so. Maybe for some people it is, but that's not how all the people I know that I'm confident know what I'm talking about have done it for themselves. That's not how they got here. They were in an extremely low place. We even define it as disgust, self-loathing. There's a certain amount of just brokenness to it. And when you go to this place, and I like to use the death metaphor perhaps too much, but when you go to this place, I realized that either I was going to commit ego death and jump into something I knew could save me, or there was just going to be no saving me. And what I did, having opened something like a door like to that before, I ran back to what worked before, and I just put my whole will and really no alternatives behind it. So this is meditation. This is vipassana. This is insight meditation. This is concentration. Every trick I knew in the book. And what happened to me? Um, I was actually reading the Three Pillars of Zen, and I went all the way through. And there's this portion to where the master is setting forth all these koans before the student. And the first part of the book has where they're doing nothing but flaming out. Not very hopeful. Even the students that come through with the most talent, because talent is a factor, um, or just desire, they would burn out. And in the back half of the book, they would figure it out. And a lot of the people in this book actually became um, the head of Zen centers all around the world. And of course, nobody actually gives away the answer to the koan. But they would say, I answer the koan and then this. And they would describe the experience largely in terms of emotion. But they'd all be going through some sort of crisis, because that is the door. As far as I'm concerned, you don't get through without a great deal of suffering. You've got to be really low. And at that point, my mind just started jumping ahead. And I realized, oh, I started kind of answering the koans before the students, you know? and I know I got the one correct. And then in my exact case, I read the deathbed letters. This is what I'm always pitching to y'all guys. I read the deathbed letters of Yeiko Iwasaki, who means a great, very great deal to me personally as a result of this. She dies at the end of the letter. She comes to enlightenment. She moves up so quickly that, in my experience, if you're in the right state of mind and you read those letters, your mind will go to where her mind is. It's a ladder. It's an elevator. And if you can get there, she can take you the rest of the way. Now, after that, I was just sort of up, a little manic, buzzy, as will happen after some light Kensho. And I start reading these letters, and my mind starts going there. I have a high degree of empathy, which is why I try to act like as much of a jerk on the surface as I can. It hurts me to be around people. But then all of a sudden, very strange things started happening. As I'm reading these letters, I'm beginning to change. Probably because I approached them at a level that was already sort of over the threshold. And at one point, I mentioned hallucinations. They will happen. At what point, I don't know if I'm reading the letters or if the letters are reading the letters or what's happening. Reality has gotten very tenuous at this point. There's a lot of arising. There's a lot of passing away. And I just start reading these letters, and suddenly I see her. I do. I had never seen a picture of her before. I saw a picture a couple days afterwards. It was exactly her. I'm seeing her in this sort of loose white thing, but then she flickers out. She's not there. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is really intense. What's happening? And then she's flashing back, and they're sort of circling each other. She's reading part of the letters. I'm reading the letters. Am I even on my bed? I don't even know where and I'm looking here, and reality is getting very, anybody's ever done LSD, or mushrooms would be closer. Reality's breathing, shit's going crazy. And suddenly, I start strobing. Now, anyone who's ever had a fruition, this is very common. This is so common that we can describe it in pretty much granular detail. Under one of three, type of events will happen at this point. An actual fruition is it's segments of experience that have been cut out. So, at the particular path I was taking through it, actually seeing Yeiko Iwasaki, extraordinarily normal. I mean, that is like one of the three paths. You can tell exactly what they used to get there. I'm really glad the other ones didn't happen to me, because that was a whole nother level of weird. But I ran over to the mirror, and suddenly it's self, not self. I, we, I, plurals. The entire thing is just blowing through very rapidly. My brain is click, 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 click. It's clicking over. It's very much a strobing effect, and it happened all over my room. I'm not saying it's real. I know where it happened. I'm saying this is how deeply I was hacking, the wetware at that point. And I look in the mirror, and then something truly strange happened that I can't explain to you if you've never done it. But instead of looking out, my eyes, it was almost like they were looking in. And I imagine that was just sort of a simulation or something my brain was doing, because at this point, all bets are off. Suddenly, I'm looking in the mirror. There's a body looking in the mirror. Everything becomes very objectified. There's a body looking in the mirror. Nothing is looking back. I'm going, and then it just sort of snap, 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 and I think I'm going to crack into 1,000 pieces. And suddenly, this wave of relief hits. The whole world was lifted off my shoulders. It was fantastic. Plus, it gives you I was just wandering around looking at objects like a child. It was amazing. Just whoa, just very, very look who's talking. Y'all probably haven't seen that movie. But at that point, I was just walking around. It was actually very hard to get back to myself. It was very hard to speak in personal pronouns. It was difficult for me to say I. There was no I. There was only one big resounding we, so I enjoyed doing it, but I enjoyed speaking and even thinking that way, but it's very hard to relate to the world that way. You see everything with this sort of beatific magnificence of a newborn child that's really just discovering light, color, all these things for the first time. But having responsibilities and family and, jobs, things of that nature, you have to, at least in my case, I had to. So that was one of the experiences. And don't let anybody tell you that an AMP event is one thing. It's not. Um, I'm not going to go into the entire AMP event because it's wild. But in my experience, you're more likely to have a series of these awakenings, each one offering a different perspective on the universe, each one more real than you are in a very real sense. And they come in a cluster and they happen all at once, and they don't happen. An AMP event is not something you pull off every day. It's something you're lucky if you get back to twice, 3 times. Some people, though, maybe some mild kensho, they know a back way, something like that. But this was one wild week, and that is the most relatable of all the things. I mean, at one point, at another point in this experience, I was running outside, and it was like, I won't say the grass was singing, but it's like all of the entire world was just alive at such a heightened level that it was almost terrifying. I actually ran back inside from my own grass because and it's overwhelming. At another point, I actually was emotionally overwhelmed and like had to beg for it to stop. At another point, and these things will happen in clusters that way. And when you experience that cluster that you can't walk away from, or explain away, or trivialize, or conceptualize, or categorize, when you experience that for yourself, that's why I say, or Mike has said before, there's no coming back. You've been bit on the ass by a dog. You can't sit here and look at yourself honestly in the face and say that that didn't happen or that that was a hallucination. Yeah, it may involve hallucinations, but if you get any kind of advanced level of meditation, you're going to see and hear all kinds of crazy things. In Zen, we teach to ignore them because they're not worthy of consideration. In terms of magic, changing the world, things like that, these things are, that's a concern that matter to you beforehand. You won't care about such things afterwards. You'll certainly not care about that. It's a distraction. So, like I said, I'm not going to go the entire experience. Um, I'm probably going to leave the thing with Avalokita out. But, I mean, I've got it written down, so if anybody wants to know, I can probably find it or.
Yeah, that's my favorite part, but I understand why you'd want to leave it out. The point was that this is just what Shao is explaining, and he's doing his very best to explain it, but it doesn't help you, and it isn't exactly the way that it happened because
No,
words
no.
suck. Words suck.
And the experience is, you know what? I can tell, Mike can tell if you've actually had it. If you, we may argue whether it's a weak kin show or a strong kin show, or if you've experienced the fruition, or if you just got right up to the edge of it, or we'll sit here and try to figure out where you are. But and it's good to have third parties kind of proofing this so you don't go too far in the left lane. It's the importance of a teacher. But I wouldn't just say teacher. I would just say confidant. I'm not going to look at you like you're crazy no matter what you tell me. However, we will know if you've actually experienced what we've experienced, what I suppose Mike is still experiencing. Hell, I'm doing a light version of it now, just remembering. Mike, I can. Oh, can I tell them? I could go into that if you wanted me to, or we could just skip it.
No, no, just give it. I just wanted to just give it an example, that wasn't from me. The really just trying to get, people listening, like, this is just one thing. This is just how it unfolded for Shao. It's not going. Then you're not going to have the same experience. This isn't a thing that everybody's going to have. It's unique to Shao, but don't get caught up and go, oh, because it was unique, that this was just a thing that happened to him, and it doesn't mean anything, and that's not true. Sorry, it's not. It's just it's different.
Um,
It's very individualized, but at the same time, there are enough common elements to where anybody that's done it before, we can smell our own, and we can smell maybe when you're just deceiving yourself.
Yeah, there are common, you could, yeah, absolutely common elements to it. Um, and it's, kind of up to you if you want to uh, come up with some story that you think will impress somebody. Okay, go for it. You can try that, but you'll be lying to yourself. And this is where I go back again and say honesty is your or. This is it's silly to lie or to try and make up something. You're honest, and because you know you're lying. But if you're not lying, then I think that will come through with what you're saying and the way that you say things. Um,
And I mean, I just want to interject real quick. Deception's not necessary.
yeah,
Actually, people who have been through it before, we could help you get through it much faster if you were just radically honest about what was happening and where. I mean, a lot of this can tip over, especially if you don't have a complete awakening. That can tip over in a fairy tale land pretty fast, and we would see this all the time. Someone would, come in and say, "You remember that woman, Mike?"
which one?
Ah, well, Mike was doing some casino work. It was with John. It's that's sort of a hack for the jhanas, and which is different from insight meditation. And there was this woman. I don't remember her name, but she was just insisting that Mike said that he had gotten to a certain place, and having been there before myself, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see how you got there. Yeah, that is valid. And she's, no, no, it doesn't happen that way, because she did meditation with Michael Taft, who is excellent, but he does it one way. I wouldn't even call it the most intuitive way. He does it one way, and that's the way he knows. And so, so you didn't get there because you didn't replicate her experience.
Yeah, now
And
I remember what you're talking
you
about now.
remember what I'm talking about. And then Mike came up to me, and I'm like, I don't know why she's discounting your experience there, Mike, because that seems like exactly how I got past that particular obstacle, and it makes sense. You can do it very intuitively, and you just change the terms a bit. Mike's like, yeah, I don't think she's ever been there. I don't mean to be saying that, but she seems like someone who's faking. And just don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to us. It's a person that's been there can show you the way. We can help you across. I'm a little bit confrontational with it. I'm not perfect. Mike's a lot more patient than I am, but we kind of work together on certain things. So if you'll just let us know where you are, we can find a shortest route out, because you're probably not as far away as you think you are. But you do need someone to kind of sit here and audit as to what's happening and what's your brain just trying to interpret as happening and presenting you with this other thing, or it does help to have an anchor. But if you'll be honest with Mike, or just if you want any help getting there, and if I were you listening to this, yeah, I'm saying we can speed up wherever you're trying to go within limits. Again, honesty is required. So,
Yeah, that's why I stress the honesty part, is because you're really just hurting yourself. You know, if you want to pretend to be like, oh no, this thing doesn't bother me, I don't get angry, or
yeah, it's not a
whatever.
competition.
Like,
We're, I
yeah,
mean, we're your friends. We're trying to get you to what we're. If you're not quite there, but you're almost there, we want you to be able to see it from this side. It's not as hard as you think it is, probably. Um, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who deceive themselves and a lot of bullshitters out there. There just are. So, and this is a big concern of Zen. This is why they insist on Zen masters. Now, personally, I think the process could be improved. I think when we have sort of rotating people asking questions, sort of hit the person from all sides, it tends to happen a little faster. And also, there's that guru problem of which I don't think it needs any introduction, where the student becomes enraptured with the teacher, or thinks, or the teacher walks around acting like they're God, or all these collateral problems of the guru model. So I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I mean, that, at least me, that's not what I'm offering. I don't want to be anybody's anything. But we would like to help you or accelerate where you are, or give you the, you're probably not, again, you're probably not that far away.
Speaking
But
of that, one of our new people, Jelly, posted a question. What if you had an ego death but didn't bring anything back from it? Like euphoria, for instance.
Well, was it done on psychedelic?
that's the first question.
I mean, it would still be ego death either way, right? He says
No,
meditation.
Okay. Yeah.
that's better.
Meditation.
Yeah, mushrooms would do it for you, or LSD or something like that if you take a high dose. But that's the drug doing it. That's not you doing it. And you know, when you're there, all you can really describe is what it's like to be on a drug that indirectly causes ego death. You didn't do the work for yourself, so you're not going to bring anything back from it. If we had to get technical, I would say you've one of the filters you dropped with that drug, with LSD, with mushrooms. One of the filters you dropped was understanding and retention. You can't retain that insight and bring it back and do anything useful with it. If you could, the hippies would have prevailed. You know, um, $3 a hit Nirvana is not. It's not sustainable.
Okay, so Jelly is defining the experience as ego death. I would have to question what exactly did what was the experience like? So, because it was in meditation, that does help a lot, but
A lot.
you're defining it as ego death. If you just explain, like you're just telling me the memory of it, that it was like this, then there was like energy, and then I can have a better idea of w- what that was, um, by you describing it. Um, so so yeah, this is exactly what Shao was saying. I don't want to be um, some guru or teacher. I don't need students. I don't want anybody to look up at me like I'm some amazing person. I'm an ordinary person. I go to work, I come home, I pay my bills. I have a wife.
He
I'm not
goes
a
to the
veg.
bathroom.
Yeah, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm your friend. I'm your friend. I want you to feel like I'm your friend, and I've had I have experience in this topic, and if you're exploring these areas and you want a little bit of help, then I'm here to offer my help, my advice, and the more honest you are, and the more willing you're to try some things out that I suggest, then the more likely it is going to unfold for you.
And I mean, it saves us time. We it takes a big investment of time, not as much as you would think, but still we've got to like carve out our weekend to help you if you're real close to get you there, um, and bring you back if that's what's going to happen. So if you're just screwing with us, I mean, please don't. I've got better shit to do. I will legitimately help anybody who wants to see what I'm talking about. But if you're just on a kick or on drugs, or which I don't have a problem with a lot of drugs. I think Mike and I don't have a problem in terms of when we're talking about enlightenment and meditation, satori and kensho. We don't have a problem with anything that's not a stimulant. But if you're going to bring coke and meth into it, no judgment, especially who I used to be in my 20s, no judgment. We can't work with that. We just can't work with that. And even mushrooms, we can babysit that, but it's going to wipe. You're not going to bring anything back from it. It'd be so much better if you just put yourself in something we call shikantaza or death ground. If you would just sit here and say, God damn it, this is what's going to fucking happen. Pardon my French. But, you're just going to sit here and Gautama said the same thing. I'm sitting under this tree. I'm not rising until I get enlightened. You're going to have to almost get a little wild with it. Just get a little careless, get a little determined. And if you can do that, then yeah, we'll try to help you cross if you're ready to go. You see what we're talking about. We can walk you through the steps back. But please don't waste our time, because this is just as valuable as y'all's is. So, two I've got two little girls. I've got shit to do. Man, there's a plague outside. You know what I mean? So just come honest. We would appreciate that a lot more, and it would help you, like Mike said, it would help you get to where you're trying to go, and then you can be a facilitator for someone else.
I think Jolie wants to talk about what happened. So give
Yeah,
them their.
Oh,
if
okay,
I
good.
if I can.
Okay, good
Um,
deal.
it basically happened uh 2 years ago. I I was a big fan of Ram Dass. I don't know if you guys know who him is.
Yeah.
So I read the
Who
book, Be
who is?
Be Here
Wait a minute.
Now.
Who are we talking about?
Ram
Baba Ram
Dass.
Das.
Why has everybody read this guy except me? Jeez.
He's a very good writer, in my opinion. So I read him, and I was trying to do. I listened to his podcast too, like not his podcast. This was like his lectures. I think it's what it's called. So in one time he said that his guru, uh, I named Karoli Baba, I think it's his name. The process that he had was he was lying on the ground or something like that and just thinking, I am dead, I am dead, I am dead, I am dead. There is no more of me, and repeating this thought until like he just snapped and had an ego death. And when he came back, he helped people with that. So I thought was very interesting to try that, like just for fun. Like I don't know if it's going to happen to me, but I would try it. So when I tried it, it was crazy, crazy experience. Like I tried to do that, like I'm dead. The idea of Jelio is dead, like repeating that in my head. And once, like I was doing that, I was kind of sleepy, but not sleeping. I just felt something like I can't even explain now. Like now, it's it's like I just um, it's very hard to explain. Sorry. I just felt like I was the entire room, like not myself. I felt like I was the walls. I felt like I was my fan. I felt the cars outside. Like at the same time that I listened to them, I felt like I was their bodies, if that makes sense. Like it was not controlling them, it's like experienced them. So I freaked out. I got up, I looked in the mirror, and it was like blank. It's like I just see this thing, but it's not me. So I was so scared that I just started talking to myself like I am Gilio, I am Gilio, I am Gilio, I am Gilio, until the moment that I believed that I was myself, like I was my ego again. So I experienced that, and then after that, I was very scared to try meditation and things like that because I didn't want to lose this sense of me again because I have a family. I things like that. I don't want to lose myself because I think it's my responsibility to be myself, you know. So that's where I am. Like I came back to the idea of Buddhism and the Hinduism because I was having a little trouble of depression and things like that. So I'm trying to find the real self again. But I'm still a little bit scared of this idea of losing myself, you know. That's it.
Can I speak real quick,
Yeah,
Shell?
I
uh,
finished it.
uh, get off the button. So this is actually a perfect example of sort of number three, glimpsing the bull. I would categorize this, and I can't say for sure. This is light Kensho. This is in a way kind of like a AMP experience. Like you see, this is
Exactly.
he can't really describe it. It's very difficult to put it into
Yeah, it's
words.
a bit of a bitch, isn't it?
Yeah, but this is like perfect example, perfect timing, exactly what we're talking about. It's a little different for everybody.
Now, you understand why it's a little kin show and why you didn't go all the way. You didn't want to go all the way. When I say you, for yourself, we say ego death solely here. For yourself, it's death. It's there's no other way to describe it's an act of suicide, so the self thinks. When people come through the door, I will sit here and they sit here and say this or that. I'm like, oh good, we've got another one ready to die. Man, it kills me. It kills me that you freaked out there.
But
Zane, go
also
ahead.
he mentions that he was scared, he was terrified.
And
Again, exactly what we
this
were
is
saying.
exact. Well, yeah, that's why I was pushing the button. I was gonna say this is that sense of primal fear. And if everybody can hear this without, it's so valid. But again, it's within a different tradition, so I'm not gonna speak up for it or anything. But if you're a Christian and an angel comes down to you, if you actually read the Bible, a curious thing happens. Nobody sits here and sees little babies with wings. Nobody sits here and sees any of these things. When they actually see these things, they're terrified. I'm not validating angels here in the Bible. What I'm actually validating is the sense of absolute animal terror. Because to yourself, it's not a game. You're dying. What is death but the end of the ego? And what are you doing by saying I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead? But killing the ego and the self, man, it's got a whole lifetime of being the center of the universe. This artificial construction that you sort of built in grade school in order to interact with the world as a form of like social technology. You want to rip that away. It really thought it was a real boy. It's like Pinocchio. And so at that point, it seems to me like you had an AMP event or the beginning of one. There was a little bit of self left right there, and it pulled the plug at the last moment.
Yeah, he was afraid from what I understand what he's saying. He was afraid that he didn't know what would happen if he really let go completely. You know, he was he was like, I don't want that. I don't want to not be me.
I'm sure
Can I
the
ask a
I does
question?
not want.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, basically the thing that's make me happy now it's because both of you had like some sort of the same experience and both of you like work and are have a family and are responsible. So I think if I try nowadays, I won't be that scared anymore because I have an example of people that have responsibilities but at the same time lost the idea of self. So it's very cool to see that.
Yeah, you could add me to that too. I've experienced ego death a few times. First time was like 19.
And we say death. I go around sounding like a fortune cookie all the time because people ask me fortune cookie questions. I mean, I say the void is not empty. When I say the void's not empty, I'm talking about that nihilistic void that you were afraid of, that there's nothing on the other side. It's sort of an extrapolation of the fear that when you die, you're just going to go on the ground, you're going to be worms, that's going to be it. And that gets sort of replicated in different forms all over your life. In various patterns throughout your life, there's this one primal fear, and that's of obliteration. So it's a bit of a pain in the ass that the actual solution to this, and I'm telling you as a guy with a family, the actual solution to this, to your whether or not, is just to jump. If you jump, I swear to God, you will be born again. God, that's horrible. I live in the South. It's terrible. But um, you're gonna you're gonna realize that there's a lot more to you than what you thought there was. It's a much deeper experience to be alive and completely awake in the world. And but you do have to sort of sacrifice something here. And in this case, yeah, you're not going to come back as you, but you're going to come back as you. I mean, screw the self, screw this little secondary construction. It starts off as your invisible friend, and it ends up causing you more pain than any other external event in life. And it's built on an uncertain and inconsistent foundation because it's just a construction. It's just something we did to interact with the world. It's not a real boy. And if you just let that shit go and yeah, jump into the void, man. You got
Mhm.
to. It's terrifying,
Yeah.
but the void isn't empty. I keep dropping that and nobody really, I think, picks up my meaning. Everyone's got an idea of personal destruction, of obliteration, of annihilation. This is the void, and for them, when they jump in, no one comes out. But the void isn't empty, and if you jump in this way, if you just let it go back to where you were, and jump. I wouldn't do it just to screw with your mind. If you'll just jump, you're going to come back a much more complete person.
Thank you.
Hey, no problem. Anyone else?
I was gonna see if B would maybe talk about her sort of AMP event.
I'd love
But
to. Hey, B,
she's
you had an AMP event? Tell us.
she is in the other room right now.
Lauren, while he's getting her, would you like to talk about your ego death?
Um, sure.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard her.
Yeah, I can. I mean, this was early days. I'd never meditated or really looked into Buddhism much before. I probably knew a little bit about the basics. And I was 19 and I took a very large dose of mushrooms for the second time ever. And
Yeah, that'd do it.
yeah, I went through my own actual death. I didn't do it mentally. I thought I actually, I hallucinated an entire situation. I basically went to a comatose state and hallucinated someone convincing me to drive, getting in an accident, and the complete destruction of my own body. I hallucinated the entire experience of cops, paramedics, hospitals, family saying goodbye, um, and reached a point where I was certain that my life was over. I could hear people saying that to me, and I had to accept it. And I just, I don't know why exactly. I had had a few actual near-death experiences before this, in the year before this, and this was, I think, a kind of a culmination of my approaching that line anyway. And so I just completely embraced the death of myself in a very real way, not just a mental way. And so it was um, embracing and abandoning everything I had ever thought I was attached to or thought I knew about myself, and stepped into the void completely, and basically said, okay, what happens next? Is it nothingness? Is it something? and and then eventually I was kind of in the darkness and realized the darkness was having a lot of geometric patterns, and I kind of snapped up out of my comatose state and realized I was just tripping really hard, which was a very fascinating sort of relief. It was like a second life. And then ever since then, I've had a separation between the sense of myself and a really big acceptance of death, and it's just been easier to understand these things having gone through that. And I've been through a couple other near-death experiences since then, like being, at the end of a gun and other things like that. But yeah, ever since that experience on mushrooms, things just changed, and that's why I think psychedelics can be very helpful. I wouldn't recommend that experience because it was traumatic and intense, and I mean, it took me a long time to understand it and think about it in a good way, but the end result was very positive.
And we're not saying they're not. Like I said, the only thing we really can't work with, and I know a lot of people are going to say can't enlightenment can't work with. Yeah, we can't work with coke or meth. First of all,
Yeah.
your brain is in such a beta wave state that we can't get it to alpha where we need it. We sure as hell can't get it down to delta or any deep wave brain waves, which is pretty much where we're going to take you. And we can't do any of that. Once you sniff or smoke that drug, we're we're powerless. You're stuck in beta. You're never going to get out of it. And that's why they're extremely self-destructive drugs. Whereas with psychedelics, you will hear some positive experiences. Sometimes somebody may be able to bring something back. Now that said, I would say the biggest problem with psychedelics is that people believe that it's the mushroom that's doing it. People think that because they pay a lot of money for it, it's the mushroom, it's the lysergic acid, it's all this that's doing it, and you really believe this balls to bones, and because you really know this, it's going to go away with the drug, and you're going to be lucky to bring anything back. Occasionally you can bring back some useful insights or the experience of having been there if it's extreme enough. On the other hand, the drug didn't do it. The drug triggered something in your brain. Meditation is rewiring your brain. That's what it is. You can
Yeah.
trigger this yourself. And that's all the difference between the experience you're referring to of ego death and an AMP experience is anything the brain can do, you can do.
Yeah, and I've done
Anything
it
a
without psychedelic
right,
a few
right.
times since
Anything
then.
a drug, so you know what I'm saying. Anything that a drug can access, you can access on your own with a little bit of work. It does take a little bit of work though, and that's why you have to want it.
Yeah,
Can
But
I can I ask another question?
sure.
sure.
Uh, so basically, I have this doubt in my mind that the only way that to transcend the ego is by meditation alone, or if I'm talking to you guys and studying Buddhism and things like that, that can
Aha.
help
I know what you're saying. I know
or
what you're
only
saying.
meditation.
It can happen in the middle of a book. It can especially happen, and this is the importance in Buddhism or Zen of the idea of the Sangha. The Sangha is the community. You know, you have people around you. We can see where you are. If you legitimately want to get somewhere, we can kind of talk you through it. In a sense, a lot of Zen Buddhism or Buddhism is about it's almost like the Western equivalent of psychotherapy in that it uses talk therapy to get you somewhere. Where we disagree is we don't necessarily believe, in fact, we absolutely don't believe that rehabilitating the self is healthy. And I think perhaps this is why psychotherapy has had such dismal results over the year. To us, the entire problem is the self. There's a much more complete and resilient self lying beneath this artificial construction. And all psychologists are really doing is trying to put you back together into a working member of society. They're trying to reconstruct the self into something that won't hate itself. But from our perspective, or at least my perspective, Buddhism is like existentialism. The problem is this conception of self that you constantly have to reintegrate and repiece together and put back together again because it's broken to begin with. It will never not be broken. So that's kind of where I get my Renzai orientation from. That's where I get I'm a bit abrupt. That my only interest is in ripping that away and killing it as fast as possible, just beating it into the ground. Is this self? Um, and like I said, Mike's probably Mike is a lot more patient than I am because I want to get right to the root of the problem. I want to do it right now. I want to let's strip this shit away and circle you, and we're gonna peg you with questions until your mind breaks. It's what I'm good at. It's what I actually prefer. And as far as holding hands or just being sympathetic or something, I really don't have any interest in it. You're much more likely to have a successful result if the experiment itself, at least this is how I feel about it, if the experiment itself is is sort of all or nothing, if it's extreme. Because, like I said, enlightenment, Satori, Kensho, whatever you want to call it, it's the product of crisis. So if you need my help, and Mike's not around to tell me to shut the hell up, if you need my help, I'm just going to try to bring you to crisis as quickly as possible. Let's just get it the hell out of the way. And that's not necessarily the best way to do it. It's just a personality quirk or a me quirk or whatever. It's just like how I like going about it.
I would agree that crisis is probably at some point a necessary impetus to get you past some certain point. I don't know at what stage it's necessary. I think my crisis at 19 happened early. I had another kind of dark night of the soul at about 26, which changed a lot of things as well and tested a lot of things that I thought had very solid foundation, and turns out that they didn't. But in terms of your question about meditation, I would say it is necessary because you do have to retrain your brain. So it's kind of like saying, can you build muscles without working out? And
That's it. I would agree. That's exactly getting back to that question exactly.
yeah,
Use it or lose it, kind of.
yeah.
It's not a pinata. It's not a prize where you break something and all the candy falls out. You know, it's something you have to work at. It's very much exactly like building muscle. I thought of saying that earlier, and I'm glad Lauren brought it up. You can forget. This is not like riding a bicycle. When I say you will never forget, okay, well, like all great memories, it can become just a memory. It can become just a light and sound and devoid of content or how you got there or what you've achieved. And there's always that risk.
Um, I don't know if I've had an arising and passing away event unless that's some of what these are. I've had experiences. I've never heard that term before I met you guys, so I don't know if it how to apply my experiences to A and P.
Well, it's actually more of a Theravada term, and it's just where we hail from in terms of everybody's just relating stories. I would actually prefer to call it stream entry myself, but entering the stream, but whatever. Tomato tomato.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I feel like stream entry is the more accurate term for myself,
Okay.
or at least feels better.
Where does this stream entry word come
It actually comes from the original Sanskrit. Um, Sanskrit is a dead language that now only exists specifically for um, Buddhistic sutras. It's basically the language of the Buddha. That's the only reason anyone has kept it. It's a very malleable, primitive language by our standards. So a lot of the words have 4 or 5 possible meanings, but they're all pretty much within 80% of each other. So
Yeah, and I put that in I kind of overlaid the two sort of maps on each other because the stream entry once returner, non-returner, arahant. Those are very familiar terms.
Um, Lauren, in terms of a death experience, another part of my AMP. This is well, unless B is B gonna B? Are you gonna share?
I can. I just feel like my story is a little bit boring, but I can share it.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So it's pretty brief. I had been doing a fair amount of meditating and listening to Dharma talks and thinking about things. And I just had this strange experience. One day, I work as a private nanny, and I was at work and I was cleaning up the bathroom. And I looked in the mirror, and for some reason, I just had this realization of like, I am not my body. Um, I've had a lot of issues in the past with self-esteem and like body issues and stuff, and I just had this realization that all of these labels that I applied to myself about being fat or plain or whatever weren't accurate, and that they were just labels, and that I wasn't this thing that I was walking around in. And then that sort of just expanded into, I'm not any of these identities that I place on myself. Like I'm not really a nanny or musician or any of these things. Like those are things that I do, but they're things that can be taken away, that can come and go. They're not the core of my identity. And I guess I remember coming home and talking to Mike about it and laughing and being like, I sound like an idiot right now. I don't know what I'm saying, but it definitely changed the way that I viewed myself and like reality, I guess. And it's been something that I've thought a lot about since and has definitely had a big effect. But like I said, boring story, very short story.
I don't think it's boring at all.
Yeah, actually,
It was
I can
very
really relate to
interesting.
that. Go ahead, Jelly.
Uh, I was just saying that it was very interesting to hear that. And another thing that I realized is that, do you guys believe in karma or something like that? Because I think I am much younger than almost everyone here. Because it's very strange, because at my age, like nobody talks about Buddhism and Hinduism and things like that. Everyone that I know of my age doesn't really care about it. And now that I'm talking to you guys, I'm seeing that you guys are somehow older than me. I think so. So, what do you guys think about that? Do you think it's like karma or just a coincidence?
Um, in terms of well, karma's a bit tricky, but in classical 2,000-year-old terms, yeah, it's evidence of great karma. Just the fact that you even have come anywhere near this is evidence of great karma. Um, Western Zen, we tend to we tend to interpret karma more as like just like the workings of samsara. It's just the way shit is. Personally, I haven't experienced a past life or anything, so I can't confirm that. I will say that actions have consequences, and your actions, whether good or bad, we don't have to extend beyond your current existence. Your actions have clearly brought you into very fortuitous circumstances by the fact that you're even questioning the nature of your reality, or whether or not there's another way to see all of this at all.
Yeah, karma is tricky. If you want to take it from the angle of what the Buddha spoke about and all of that, then you can do that. I'm not sure if I am misremembering or if I'm just making something up, but I think the Buddha, it's very difficult to say what the Buddha said or didn't say. If he did speak about karma, I think he only spoke about it because of who he was speaking to at the time. There were a lot of there's a lot about karma with Hinduism and Indian traditions, and spirituality. And so he might have been relating karma to help them understand where he was coming from. But
It really depends. Sorry to interrupt, but it really depends on the on which sutras or suttas that we accept that, like you said, Gautama actually said, because there's no editor for Buddhist scripture the way there is for Christian scripture. Well, there was never any big conference where everybody got together and edited what's good and what's not, what's true and what's not, this and that. So because it's such an open-ended invitation, I mean, I'm sure someone's still writing a sutra today. It's very undifferentiated. Now that said, there are a few sutras that everyone tends to say, okay, yeah, that one. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, Mike. I'm sorry.
that's okay. But I'm kind of on the same level that Shao is. Like, I haven't experienced anything, any kind of visions or anything like that that points to past lives at all. Like, not even the tiniest inkling of anything that I could even begin to interpret in that way. Um, so, karma, in the way that I think most people understand it, is sort of useless for me personally. Um, I would like to think more in the terms of causes and effects. So because
I'd agree.
you lay down and you said, "Hey, I read about this technique or this thing." Okay, so picking up the book, um, reading it was a caused an effect that you would then try it out. You were curious. Because you were curious, cause you laid down and you tried it, and then there was an effect. And so it just kind of goes like that. But to try and relate karma, which is like relating it to past lives, past, like there's some kind of bank deposit that you can unload good um, merit into and bad merit. I don't know. That doesn't really seem to fit into my experience.
At the same time, I don't know. I did get if if Gautama's pitching it, Gautama's never. We have this actual saying that's become sort of ritualized, but once you actually cross the stream and you get to the other side, there's sort of this spontaneous joy that comes right after the relief, where you say something to the effect of, "Oh my God, they didn't lie to me," because that's what you're expecting going into it. That we're being perhaps fanciful, or we didn't interpret that correctly, or maybe there's something, but it's not what they're saying, or that doesn't make logically consistent philosophical sense. But we were talking, like Mike said before, about a very, very real thing, and your first reaction, or perhaps your second one, is going to be, oh shit, they were serious. That's a real thing. There's a real thing here, and it is astonishing. But as far as past lives or something like that, I know certain Zen masters or Roshis who will insist that if you don't adopt this perspective, you're only going to get so far. I would say, like Mike, personally, I haven't experienced it, but I in the law of causes and effects, and whether it was just dumb lucky, or sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. Either it's dumb lucky or smart lucky, or just smart. Somehow you got to the point to where you're very close, and good for you. It is fortuitous.
About
I
karma.
understood. Thank. Yeah, Lauren can speak too if she wants.
I would just add that, I'm kind of with them. I don't think good things happen to good people. I don't think it's that simple. I will say, though, that I think that karma is just the idea that no one exists in a vacuum. no one is completely separate from the rest of all of existence. One of my favorite words I like to use here is interdependence. Everything is dependent on everything else and exists in relative to everything else, or in relativity. Like Carl Sagan said, if you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you have to first invent the whole universe. And in that way, karma does exist because everything you do affects all of the rest of existence. Even if you can't, you know, directly affect the star Sirius, the fact that you exist and Sirius exists does affect each other in a weird karmic way. If that makes sense.
Yes, mate. Thank you.
Do you guys agree with that, Shao and Mike?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
I guess just the breakdown of like how it's usually taken, karma, is that you can somehow bank good things, which I'm not sure. Like, yeah, you can affect things, and those things can have a positive outcome, but
You will
to
reap what you sow.
yeah, no arguing there.
I guess I tend to think of it as like the same thing you guys are saying. I often think of the phrase natural consequences, and I think that's because I work with kids, so I use that phrase a lot. But I think of karma as natural consequences that for the most part, if you put good out into the world, that eventually good will come back to you. And I do agree with Lauren that it's true that in minor ways at least that the things that we do affect others, so that could be part of it.
But really, none of these concepts are necessary to waking up.
I would say
All
that
right, I probably shouldn't
interdependence
say
is.
none. No, interbeing, you say interdependence, I say interbeing. Um, yeah, I mean it is. Perhaps that was a little drastic saying none. Past lives are not a prerequisite to enlightenment. They may follow enlightenment. I don't know. I'm not at the top. There isn't one. Certain set of beliefs to get there. No.
I think karma also has nothing to do with past lives, if that even is real. But I think karma has to do with what we're not aware of, because we can do things that where we don't know the reasons for it, and that creates karma in itself. So if we become angry, or we're not in control of it, or we are sad, we don't know why exactly. We have maybe an idea, but as long as we are not aware of the things we are not aware of, then these things just tend to snowball and leaves us without control of the situations.
I would say that's an excellent description.
Yeah. Wow.
I appreciate everybody showing up. I had a really good turnout this week, and I hope you have a good weekend.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.